Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 6 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as Rasa of the Sand and brought greatness to the Sand Village. Let the tale begin. Chapter 126, Kunmi. Under the night sky, within the Sand Clan's compound. As the clock approached 8, Michikawa, having finished dinner, prepared to head to the Kazekage building for the meeting. However, judging by his furrowed brow, his mood was far from light. The decision Rasa had made earlier that day, to abolish the creation of Jinchuriki in the village, struck him as overly idealistic. He was well aware of the dangers involved in creating a Jinchuriki and the hostility they faced within the village. But in his view, these sacrifices were worth it for the sake of possessing a tailed beast, a weapon of war that far surpassed human capabilities. Until now, Michikawa had believed Rasa was a competent Kazekage. In fact, he had even admitted to himself that Rasa had, at times, outperformed his own mentor, the Third Kazekage. This was why he had changed his stance and begun supporting Rasa. But now, Rasa's decision to abolish the Jinchuriki system made him question whether his support had been misplaced. As he pondered this, footsteps echoed from outside. His son, Kunmi, walked in. Seeing his father, Kunmi was slightly surprised but quickly composed himself and bowed respectfully. And, Kunmi is an OG. Father. Like most fathers, Michikawa wasn't the type to express his emotions openly. His interactions with his son were restrained, almost formal, as if they were strangers. Why are you back so late? Kunmi, much like his father, replied calmly. After school, I spent some time playing with my classmates from the Ninja Academy. I see. How are your studies at the academy going? The classes are boring. They're teaching things I already know. This didn't surprise Michikawa. The first year of the Ninja Academy focused on basic cultural education, something the son of the Sand Clan's leader had long since mastered. Don't waste your talent. Make sure you keep up with the clan's curriculum as well. Understood, father. With that, the conversation between father and son came to an end, and Michikawa prepared to leave for the Kazekage building. But then, recalling how his son had seemed slightly more cheerful recently, Michikawa thought of something and asked, "Do you enjoy attending the Ninja Academy?" The question caught Kunmi off guard. He thought for a moment, then nodded nervously. This puzzled Michikawa. But you just said the classes are boring. Kunmi hesitated, then replied with a mix of uncertainty and determination. I enjoy spending time with my classmates. After saying this, he looked up at his father, bracing for a reprimand. Michikawa's face turned a little grim. While he had sent his son to the Ninja Academy partly as a gesture of goodwill toward Rasa, he couldn't tolerate Kunmi wasting his potential by playing around at school. Just as he was about to scold his son, he suddenly remembered Rasa's words from earlier that day. He paused, then asked, Kunmi, let me ask you something. What is it? Kunmi hesitated before Michikawa asked again. If one day, you were forced to choose between the village's interests and your friends, what would you choose? This question left the 6-year-old Kunmi stunned. His small face scrunched up in thought, and after a moment of contemplation, he asked, Father, do I have to choose only one? Michikawa, intrigued by his son's response, asked, What difference does it make? Kunmi beamed a smile. If I don't have to choose just one, I want to protect both the village and my friends. Michikawa narrowed his gaze slightly and pressed further. But what if your strength isn't enough to protect both? What if you can only choose one? Kunmi's small face showed an unusual determination as he replied. Then I'll train harder to gain the strength to protect both. As a ninja, isn't the purpose of training to protect the village and our comrades? That's what you taught me, father. At that moment, seeing the resolute expression on his young son's face, Michikawa's eyes widened in realization. It dawned on him why Rasa had made the decision he did. He stood up, gently patted his son's head, and, in a rare display of tenderness, praised him. That's a good answer. It seems I, as an adult, failed to see what you could. This unexpected warmth left Kunmi's face filled with astonishment. But the surprises didn't end there. From now on, spend more time with your friends at school. You can even invite them over to our home if you'd like. Really? Kunmi's face lit up with joy. Michikawa smiled, ruffled his son's hair, and then left. He didn't mention that he had already found a good teacher for Kunmi. His son's outstanding response had already satisfied him. Perhaps this was the reason why the Kazekage had decided to abolish the Jinchuriki system. Under the dark night sky. By 8:10 p.m., the 9 individuals had gathered on the rooftop of the Kazekage building. Though only half a day had passed since they last met, everyone could sense that Rasa was in an exceptionally good mood. The usual stern demeanor of the Kazekage was replaced by a rare smile. This piqued everyone's curiosity. Unfortunately, Rasa had no intention of explaining. Seeing that everyone had arrived, he used his gold dust to lift everyone onto a cloud of sand and took off into the sky. As they soared through the air, Pakura, standing on the sand cloud, couldn't help but ask, "Where are you taking us?" "Be patient. You'll find out when we get there." TCH. Pakura clicked her tongue in annoyance and stepped aside. Karura, standing next to Rasa, recalled something Saramu had mentioned. Pakura seemed to have some unusual feelings toward her husband. A strange, mysterious smile appeared on Karura's face. Among the 9 people present, only Baki likely knew their destination. But since the Kazekage hadn't said anything, he didn't dare speak up. And so, the group flew toward their destination. The desert night was undeniably beautiful. The endless night sky was clear, adorned with countless stars, and the moon was large and bright. Most of the group were women, and they marveled at the breathtaking scenery. Even Karura and Pakura, who had lived in Sunagakure their entire lives, rarely had the chance to admire the desert nightscape from such a height. The 2 young girls were especially captivated. The men, however, remained calm and composed. Just then, Chio, who had been standing on the sand cloud and avoiding the younger crowd, glanced down at the desert below. Her eyes widened in shock as she spotted something unbelievable. "How is this possible? What is that?" Chapter 127, Breathing Technique. As someone who had lived in Sunagakure since its founding, grown up during the era of the first Kazekage, became a jonin during the second Kazekage's reign, and rose to the position of elder during the third Kazekage's time, Chio was intimately familiar with the surroundings of the village. In fact, she knew the area like the back of her hand. But now, as she looked down at the winding rivers and sprawling forests that seemed to have sprung up across the vast desert, Chio was utterly baffled. This wasn't a trick of her eyes. Her reaction caught Ebizo's attention, and he too noticed the changes in the desert below, his face filled with astonishment. "What is this?" The others quickly noticed as well. While they might not have the same deep understanding of the village's surroundings as the 2 elders, they knew one thing for certain: this desert, with its harsh environment, was known as the Devil's Desert. But now, looking at the patches of greenery scattered across the desert, it didn't look like hell, it looked like paradise. Suddenly, everyone recalled the green miracle that had appeared in the village. Glancing at Rasa, who stood silently at the front, they began to understand. At that moment, the beauty of the night sky no longer held their interest. After all, while the desert nightscape was stunning, for those who lived in the desert, the miracle of green life was far more captivating. As Rasa led them further toward Dragon's Salt, the group noticed that the forests below became increasingly dense, with birds and other animals appearing here and there. This left everyone even more amazed and curious about how Rasa had accomplished such a feat. After about half an hour, an even larger forest came into view. The forest was so vast that it was roughly a quarter the size of Sunagakure itself. To the people of Sunagakure, this was nothing short of a divine miracle. Among the group, only Baki remained relatively calm, as he had witnessed this transformation firsthand. Upon reaching their destination, Rasa controlled the gold dust cloud to descend. Bunpuku, having been informed in advance, had lit a bonfire at the edge of the forest to welcome them. As the group stepped off the gold dust cloud, they felt like country bumpkins entering a grand palace, staring in disbelief at the enormous forest before them. Some even wondered if they were dreaming. Chio and Ebizo, however, had mixed expressions as they looked at Bunpuku, who now appeared more vibrant and energetic than ever. "I hope bringing so many people here hasn't disturbed you, Bunpuku-sama," Rasa said politely, introducing Bunpuku to the group. Despite being high-ranking members of Sunigakure, neither Pakura nor Michikawa had ever met Bunpuku in person. As the Jinchuriki, Bunpuku had been kept in secret confinement during the Third Kazekage's era due to his advanced age and the high risk of losing control. As expected, the moment Bunpuku's name was mentioned, everyone's attention shifted to him, their expressions turning serious. Only Hana and Anoka, who didn't know what Bunpuku represented, remained oblivious. Bunpuku smiled gently. "Not at all, Kazekage-sama. You're too kind. All of this is your doing. I'm merely a guest here." Hearing Bunpuku's words, the group's expressions grew even more peculiar as their suspicions were confirmed. Rasa, however, didn't waste any time. He turned to the group and said, "This place, I've named it Dragon's Oasis. As you can see, this was once a desert. But through a special method, I transferred the Dragon Vein Chakra from Roran here, creating what you see before you." Once Rasa confirmed their suspicions, everyone couldn't hold back their excitement. Dragon's Oasis? What a fitting name! This is nothing short of a miracle. But Kazekage-sama, why have you brought us here? Have you found a way for us to learn how to use the Dragon Vein Chakra? Seeing everyone chime in with questions, Rasa explained. "The reason I've brought you here is exactly what you're thinking. It is to help you master the power of the Dragon Vein Chakra. However, the term Dragon Vein Chakra is outdated. I now refer to it as Senjutsu Energy." Senjutsu Energy! Pakura's eyes lit up with excitement. However, Rasa quickly tempered their expectations. "But unfortunately, I haven't yet found a way for all of you to master Senjutsu Energy. Can you sense the dense Senjutsu energy radiating from this forest?" At this, everyone closed their eyes to focus. Most of them frowned and shook their heads, unable to sense anything. Only Hana raised her hand excitedly and said, "I can feel it. It's a warm, life-filled energy, just like Rasa-sama's." "Good." Rasa nodded with a smile. "That's why I brought Hana here as well." He then looked at the rest of the group. Hana is special. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, she possesses extraordinary sensory abilities. But unfortunately, aside from her, none of you here have that ability. Without the ability to sense it, you can't absorb this energy, let alone master it. The group understood that Rasa must have another plan in mind. Sure enough, Rasa continued. "So, I have an idea, though it's just an idea for now. I'm not sure if it will work, which is why I've brought all of you here. You are the most talented shinobi in Sunigakure. If even you can't harness this power, then there's no hope for the rest of the village." Chio, understanding now, said, "So, Kazekage-sama, you brought us here to help develop this power?" "Exactly. While I've mastered this energy, the method I used is unique and can't be taught to others. So, you'll have to rely on yourselves. However, I can offer you a suggestion." "What suggestion?" Pakura asked eagerly. In return, Rasa didn't keep them in suspense. "I call it the breathing technique." "Breathing technique?" "That's right. The principle is simple." Rasa spread his arms wide. "Even though you can't sense this energy, it doesn't mean it isn't there. In fact, your bodies are surrounded by dense Senjutsu energy right now. So, since you can't sense it, the best way to absorb it is through breathing. By inhaling this energy, you can use its powerful life force to activate and strengthen your bodies." "That's my idea." The group's eyes lit up with understanding. "However, the specifics of how to develop this technique will be up to you. While I'll assist you in sensing Senjutsu energy, I don't have much time to dedicate to this project. My expectations are high. I want you to develop a taijutsu technique that all of Sunagakure can practice, allowing us to harness this vast Senjutsu energy and enhance our strength. Chapter 128, Senjutsu Energy, Part 1. It was clear that Rasa's so-called breathing technique was inspired by another anime he had seen in his previous life, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. To some extent, this method of training was quite reliable, akin to aerobic exercises in fitness training. As for why Rasa had revealed the existence of Senjutsu energy in this place to so many people, it was because he needed to strengthen the faction capable of using Senjutsu energy. The more people who could use Senjutsu energy, the less resistance he would face when the time came to convert all the world's Senjutsu energy into chakra. Hearing this, everyone present understood Rasa's intentions. Is this similar to Konoha's 8 gates? Michikawa asked, seeking clarification. Yes, but as you've all trained in the 8 gates, you know its entry barrier is quite high, and the side effects are severe. What I need is a taijutsu technique that's suitable for all ages, with minimal side effects and a low entry barrier. Of course, the advanced stages can be more challenging, but the basics must be accessible to everyone. My goal is to improve the overall potential of Sunagakure's citizens to some extent. Everyone nodded, finally grasping Rasa's vision. From now on, all of you are free to come here to train at any time. However, secrecy is paramount. This place cannot be exposed to too many people yet. Additionally, Rasa glanced back at the forest and warned. The depths of the forest are off limits unless you have my explicit permission or are accompanied by Bunpuku-sama. He will explain the rules to you and will remain here to oversee things. Ebizo, connecting the dots, asked. So, Kazekage-sama, when you asked me to develop a large-scale barrier technique, was it to protect this place? Yes and no, Rasa explained. That's one of the reasons. The other is that, as you've likely noticed, with more people joining Sunagakure, our current land is no longer sufficient. In the future, Sunagakure will inevitably expand. As Senjutsu energy continues to transform this desert, more habitable areas will emerge. When the time comes to relocate the village, we'll lose the natural protection of the terrain, and barriers will become our only defense. The group was surprised by how far ahead Rasa was thinking. I understand. For the future of the village, I'll do everything in my power to develop the barrier technique you need. Ebizo declared. There's no need to push yourself to the brink, Elder. With Anoka's assistance, it should be easier than you think. Anoka, you'll also need to work hard. You can discuss the reverse summoning technique with Ebizo-sama. Once everything is ready, I plan to connect this place to the Forgotten Island. Forgotten Island? What's that? The sudden mention of this name piqued everyone's curiosity. Rasa began to explain. That is an island inhabited by many giant creatures. It was also the main reason I left the village this time. The creatures there are highly suitable for summoning contracts. However, the island is too far away. The best way to control it is to use the reverse summoning technique to create a spatial passage. While these creatures may not compare to the 3 great sage regions, they are more than enough to address Sunagakure's lack of powerful summoning creatures. Everyone was amazed by this revelation. It seemed that Rasa, as the Kazekage, had been doing far more than they had imagined. In comparison, the village's high-ranking officials and elders felt as though they had been slacking off, contributing little. Seeing this, Chiyo took the initiative to speak up. I understand. Leave it to me. I'll quickly familiarize myself with this energy and develop the corresponding techniques. However, I'll need you to explain the characteristics of this Senjutsu energy, Kazekage-sama. Otherwise, without the ability to sense it, this old woman would be completely lost. Of course. Rasa breathed a sigh of relief seeing Chiyo take on the task so proactively. When it came to developing techniques, Chiyo was undoubtedly the most talented in the village. While Pakura was also highly gifted, she was still too young. Technique development required not only inspiration but also accumulated wisdom. Chiyo's words also ignited the curiosity of the others, who were eager to learn just how powerful this so-called Senjutsu energy was. Rasa didn't hold back. After gaining the power of Morio, the abilities he was about to demonstrate could no longer be considered his trump cards. Follow me. He wasn't foolish enough to destroy the newly formed forest just to showcase his power. He walked a few steps to the edge of the forest, where the desert began. The others followed curiously. Once they were in a suitable location, Rasa stopped and turned to face the group, ready to explain Senjutsu energy. First, the most basic characteristic of Senjutsu energy is its powerful life force. As he spoke, Rasa pulled out a kunai from his pocket and made a shallow cut on his palm. He held it up for everyone to see, and to their astonishment, the wound healed visibly before their eyes. Essentially, this is the result of using Senjutsu energy to activate and enhance the body's natural healing abilities. However, unlike the star release chakra I once gave you, which consumes the energy within your cells and places a burden on your body, Senjutsu energy is different. This energy comes from nature itself. Not only does it not burden you, but its life force also enhances your recovery, reduces fatigue, and boosts your physical stamina. With that, Rasa extended his hand and walked up to each person, infusing them with a small amount of Senjutsu energy. Aside from Pakura, who had experienced the power of Senjutsu energy before, the others were stunned. They felt as though they had just woken up from a deep, restful sleep. Their bodies were filled with energy, their spirits invigorated, and it seemed as though old ailments had been healed, making them feel years younger. So this is Senjutsu energy? This life force is truly incredible. Chiyo exclaimed in awe. Michikawa clenched his fist, equally amazed. With this power, we can finally discard Star Release Chakra. Exactly. Rasa nodded. Once you master Senjutsu energy, Star Release Chakra will indeed become obsolete. Using Senjutsu energy to train in the 8 gates will no longer place such a heavy burden on your bodies. As Rasa spoke, his gaze shifted to Pakura, who blushed slightly, clearly recalling Rasa's earlier concern for her. Now, for the second point. Like Star Release Chakra, Senjutsu energy is fundamentally a force that activates and enhances the body. This means it can significantly boost your taijutsu. I won't demonstrate this here. As for its effects on ninjutsu, I haven't tested that yet. That's something you'll need to explore. Rasa then decided to hover to next point. Having covered the basic characteristics of Senjutsu energy, let's move on to some of its abilities. The first one I'll introduce is called Material Transformation. With that, Rasa clasped his hands together, and Senjutsu energy surged within him. For Pillar House Technique. Chapter 129, Senjutsu Energy, Part 2. Rumble. With a deafening roar, countless trees erupted from the ground, twisting and intertwining. A massive 3-story building rose from the desert. At this sight, the expressions of everyone present shifted from astonishment to outright terror. Even Anoka, who had only recently joined Sunagakure, was wide-eyed with shock. The others were no less stunned. Pakura, Michikawa, and Bunpuku were visibly shaken, their faces filled with awe. Baki trembled uncontrollably, cold sweat dripping from his forehead. Chiyo and Ebizo stared in disbelief, their bodies trembling slightly. Karura covered her mouth with her hands, while Yashimaru's eyes widened as he looked at his brother-in-law. Only Hana, who had known about this beforehand, remained relatively calm. This is wood release. The wood release of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Michikawa couldn't contain his shock and blurted out the words. Rasa, however, remained calm and gave a firm denial. No, this is not wood release. This is what I wanted to show you, the ability of Senjutsu energy called Material Transformation. What? At this point, everyone felt their brains short-circuiting. Wasn't this clearly the legendary wood release used by the god of shinobi, Hashirama Senju, to bring peace to the shinobi world? Of course, it was wood release. But Rasa would never admit it, as the implications were too significant. However, This didn't stop Rasa from offering an alternative explanation for the wood release and laying the groundwork for his future use of it. Rasa turned to Chiyo, who was still reeling from the shock, and said, "Chiyo-sama, do you remember the scroll I gave you on Dragon Vein puppetry? It mentioned the ability of material transformation." Rasa's reminder instantly brought the memory back to Chiyo. Indeed, the scroll Rasa had given her on Dragon Vein puppetry had mentioned a similar ability. At the time, she hadn't paid much attention to it, nor had she connected it to wood release. But now, seeing the skeptical looks on everyone's faces, Rasa decided to demonstrate his favorite technique. Golden Dragon Staff. A golden staff appeared in his hand. Watch closely. In his hands, the golden dragon staff began to transform. It shifted from a staff into various weapons, swords, shuriken, knives, hammers, chains, and its material changed as well. It went from golden sand to black iron sand, then to ordinary sand, and finally to wood. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Rasa then explained. This is the material transformation ability of Senjutsu energy. In theory, I can use Senjutsu energy to create various materials. In fact, Magnet Release also has a similar ability, using chakra to create iron sand or gold sand. Michikawa, as a master of Magnet Release, was taken aback. Now that he thought about it, Magnet Release did indeed have such a capability. Could this really not be wood release? Yet, something still felt off to Michikawa. Rasa, however, didn't dwell on the issue and moved on to explain the second ability of Senjutsu energy. Inorganic reincarnation, this is the second ability of Senjutsu energy. Simply put, it can give life to inorganic matter and control it. Like this. Under Rasa's control, the golden dragon staff in his hand began to move on its own, growing, extending, thickening, and thinning at an astonishing speed. Before the group could recover from the shock of the wood release, they were once again stunned by this new display of power. Chiyo, who had calmed down slightly, recalled something and said, "The Dragon Vein puppetry technique also has a similar ability. That man, Amrokuzan, used it to control his puppets." Exactly. However, there's one thing to note, giving life doesn't mean giving intelligence. So, the inorganic matter that's given life still requires the user's control. Chiyo, however, had another thought. This is already an incredible ability. At the very least, it could revolutionize Sunegakure's puppetry techniques. Imagine puppets that don't require chakra strings to control and are even more flexible. Her words lit up the eyes of the Sunegakure shinobi present. One of the major weaknesses of Sunegakure's puppetry was its reliance on chakra strings. If the strings were cut, the puppets would temporarily lose functionality, which was a fatal flaw. Rasa suddenly thought of something and said, "Speaking of which, there's something I need Chiyo-sama's help with." "Oh? What is it?" "Chiyo-sama, you're familiar with the nine-tailed beasts that exist in the shinobi world, right?" Rasa's sudden question left everyone stunned, especially Bunpuku, the Jinchuriki. "I'd like Chiyo-sama to create 9 puppets for me, modeled after the nine-tailed beasts." "Is that possible?" Rasa's unusual request puzzled Chiyo. However, considering the strange and powerful abilities Rasa had just demonstrated, she nodded. "Understood. Creating puppets isn't difficult, but the key is what kind of effect you're aiming for, Kazekage-sama. We can discuss the details privately." "Very well. Now, for the third ability of Senjutsu energy. This one is easier to understand." Rasa planted the golden dragon staff into the ground and took a few steps back. He then turned to his brother-in-law and said, "Yashimaru, use a fire release technique on it." Yashimaru, who had been standing quietly at the back, stepped forward at his brother-in-law's command. He formed hand seals and unleashed a simple great fireball technique at the weapon. Then, everyone saw why Rasa had given such an order. The moment Yashimaru's fireball made contact with the golden dragon staff, the flames were visibly absorbed. As the group stared in shock, Rasa explained, This is the third characteristic of Senjutsu energy, the ability to absorb chakra, including techniques formed from chakra. Pakura gritted her teeth and said, "You've got to be kidding me. That ability is way too broken. Doesn't that make you invincible?" "Not quite. First, Senjutsu energy can't absorb things that naturally exist in the world. For example, magnet release manipulates naturally occurring iron sand and gold sand through magnetic forces. However, if the chakra within the sand is absorbed, the sand will lose control. Additionally, yin-yang release, taijutsu, and attacks from conventional weapons can still harm a Senjutsu energy user. While taijutsu and conventional weapons were understandable, what was yin-yang release? Yin-yang release? Are you talking about the nature transformation of yin and yang chakra? No. Rasa shook his head. That's a different concept. Let's use Sunegakure's magnet release as an example. Our magnet release is a technique that generates magnetic forces by combining wind and earth chakra natures, which then control iron sand and gold sand. However, after generating magnetic forces, freely controlling the iron sand and gold sand into the desired forms isn't easy. That's where yin and yang chakra natures come in. Yin release creates form, while yang release grants life. In this process, yin and yang chakra play a supporting role. But yin-yang release is different. It's the pure use of yin and yang chakra's power. Chapter 130, Yomi Space. Rasa's explanation cleared up some of the confusion in everyone's minds. However, when it came to yin-yang release, the group was still somewhat puzzled. They had never seen or experienced yin-yang release techniques before. This was understandable, as yin-yang release was a power at the level of the Sage of Six Paths, a secret art only accessible to those with Otsutsuki lineage. The highest level of power ordinary shinobi could achieve was Kekkei Toda, such as dust release. Alright, that's all I currently know about the characteristics and abilities of Senjutsu energy. From here on out, you'll need to explore and understand it through your own training. Rasa didn't reveal everything he knew about Senjutsu. For one, Senjutsu energy, in his view, was different from natural energy. It could be used without mixing it with chakra. Secondly, he didn't want to expose the fact that he couldn't use the 5 basic nature transformations. With that, he had said all he needed to. Do you have any other questions? Everyone shook their heads, their expressions a mix of seriousness and anticipation as they gazed at the vast forest around them. Rasa nodded in satisfaction. Then you're free to explore. You now know the location of this place. If you're unsure, you can ask Baki to guide you here. Starting today, you can come here to train at any time. However, this is limited to you. Everything here must remain confidential from the rest of the village. Seeing that no one had any objections, Rasa turned to Hana and continued. Hana, your task here is the most challenging. Aside from me, you're the only one who can sense Senjutsu energy. So, if anyone experiences anything unusual during their training, you need to alert them immediately. Understood, Rasa-sama. Hana nodded earnestly, her expression both obedient and serious. Good. Now, feel free to look around and familiarize yourselves with the environment. I have some personal matters to attend to. Bunpuku, Karura, come with me. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Rasa, Bunpuku, and Karura flew into the air, heading deeper into the forest. Soon, they arrived at the heart of the forest, the center of the seal. Karura gasped as she saw the massive divine tree surrounded by 4 towering statues. Rasa, however, frowned slightly as he looked at the tree. He turned to Bunpuku and Karura and said, Next, I need to go to a certain place. Since there's some uncertainty involved, I need to make some preparations. Bunpuku was puzzled, while Karura immediately grew anxious and asked, Rasa-kun, is it dangerous? Rasa hesitated. I'm not sure. Based on the goodwill the other party has shown so far, it should be safe. But since this entity is completely unknown to me, I can't say for certain. Bunpuku then asked curiously. Then, Kazekage-sama, Is it necessary for you to go to this place? Or do you have to go now? Originally, there was no rush. But this time, the other party took the initiative to reach out. I'm not sure of their intentions, but one thing is certain, if they're coming to me directly, it's unlikely to be a trivial matter. That's why I think it's better to meet them sooner rather than later. Of course, another reason is that I now have some confidence that even if they try to harm me, I can escape. Bunpuku nodded in understanding. What do you need us to do, Kazekage-sama? Rasa clasped his hands together. Summoning technique, Gate of Yomi. As Senjutsu energy surged within him, a massive, ancient-looking stone gate rose from the ground. The gate appeared plain, with no carvings or decorations, and its doors were tightly shut, hiding whatever lay beyond. If Anoka had been there, she would have recognized this gate as identical to the one at the shrine in the land of demons that sealed Morio. This was the first ability Rasa had gained after absorbing Morio's power. As the inheritor of Morio's power, he also inherited the alternate dimension created by Morio, a vast, empty world known as Yomi. As the master of this space, Rasa could freely open portals to enter and exit it. However, for others to enter, they would need to use a summoning technique to call forth the Gate of Yomi and open it. Seeing the massive stone gate rise out of thin air, Bunpuku's face showed curiosity, while Karura's expression was filled with concern. What I need you to do is simple. It's currently 9 p.m. If I haven't returned by this time tomorrow, I need you to open this gate. I'll teach you the hand seals required to do so. The reason Rasa took this precaution was straightforward. As the master of the Yomi space, while he could freely enter and exit it, he couldn't choose his exit point at will, unlike techniques like Kamui or Kagaya Otsutsuki's Amanamanaka. To be precise, the point where he entered the space would also be the point where he exited. This meant he could use the Yomi space to evade enemy attacks, but if he couldn't defeat the enemy, he would be trapped inside, waiting for the enemy to leave. If the enemy refused to leave and guarded the entrance, Rasa would either have to stay inside indefinitely or wait until he became strong enough to defeat the enemy. Morio, as the former master of this space, was well aware of this limitation. Thus, he developed this summoning technique, creating a backdoor to the space. Rasa quickly taught Bunpuku and Karura the hand seals needed to open the gate. Once he confirmed they had mastered the technique, Rasa felt a sense of relief. These two were the only people in the world he could fully trust. Bunpuku, because of his noble character. Karura, because they now had a child together. With this contingency plan in place, Rasa felt secure enough to meet the White Snake Sage of Ryuchi Cave. With that in mind, he pulled out the scroll given to him by Tenjin from his pocket. Seeing the worried and curious looks on their faces, Rasa explained where he was going. The place I'm about to visit is one of the 3 great sage regions, Ryuchi Cave. The White Snake Sage, who rules there, has requested to meet me, so I must go. The Gate of Yomi wasn't his only safeguard. After all, he had not only inherited Morio's power but also the power of the Shrine Maiden. Karura, with her submissive nature, never opposed Rasa's decisions. She simply looked at him with concern. Bunpuku, knowing that persuasion was futile, said, "Don't worry, Kazekage-sama. Karura and I will guard this place until you return." "Good." With that, Rasa unsealed the scroll. A burst of white mist erupted, and a figure reappeared before Rasa. Chapter 131, The White Snake Sage. Poof! Accompanied by a burst of white mist, the floating Taijutsuhime slowly opened her eyes and appeared before the 3 individuals, Rasa, Bunpuku, and Karura. With a gentle voice that perfectly matched her beauty, she spoke. "Oh, how surprising. Has Rasa-sama already prepared so quickly?" However, as soon as she finished speaking, her expression suddenly changed. Sensing something, her beautiful face transformed into a terrifying serpent-like visage. Her eyes widened as she glanced around, eventually landing on the enormous divine tree. Stuttering, she exclaimed, As such pure natural energy. What kind of power is this? Could this be what the White Snake Sage Sama mentioned? This sudden reveal of her true form startled everyone. Karura, who had initially thought her husband had deceived yet another beautiful girl, was both shocked and ashamed of her lack of trust in him upon seeing Tajutsuhime's serpentine face. Fortunately, Tajutsuhime quickly regained her composure. Realizing her lapse in demeanor, she immediately reverted to her gentle, beautiful appearance. Rasa, as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual, calmly replied, "Since the White Snake Sage-sama has invited me, I naturally dare not delay." Of course, Rasa had intentionally summoned Tajutsuhime here to observe her reaction to the divine tree. After all, once he revealed the existence of this place to Pakura and the others, its secrets wouldn't remain hidden for long. Moreover, he no longer cared as much. With a new demonic chakra fruit and an alternate dimension at his disposal, even if something were to happen here, he could simply grow a new divine tree in his own space. Hearing Rasa's words, Tajutsuhime swallowed hard, forcing her gaze away from the divine tree. With a smile, she said, "In that case, please follow me to Ryuchi Cave to meet the White Snake Sage-sama." Rasa, however, wasn't about to leave so casually. "Please wait a moment." Tajutsuhime was taken aback. "I have a few things I'd like to confirm. For example, how long will I need to stay in Ryuchi Cave, and how will I return? As the Kazekage of Sunagakure, I have many responsibilities in the village. If I'm away for too long—" Rasa didn't finish his sentence, but Tajutsuhime understood. "Please rest assured, it won't take long. You'll understand once you meet the White Snake Sage-sama. As for your return—" Tajutsuhime lifted her sleeve, revealing a small white snake slithering out. "After Rasa-sama meets with the White Snake Sage-sama, this summoning snake will use the reverse summoning technique to bring you back." "I see. Then I have no further concerns." After speaking, Rasa turned to Bunpuku and Karura. "Bunpuku-sama, Karura, please wait here for me." "Understood, Kazekage-sama." "Please be careful, Rasa-kun." Only then did Tajutsuhime notice the two individuals before her. "This chakra, is that Shikaku? And this woman, is she Rasa-sama's wife? It seems there's an incredible little life growing inside her. Oh, what is this?" Tajutsuhime didn't voice her thoughts aloud. Instead, she turned to Rasa and said, "If Rasa-sama has no further questions, I will now use the reverse summoning technique." "Understood. Thank you." Poof! With a puff of white smoke, Rasa and Tajutsuhime vanished from the spot. Poof! In the blink of an eye, Rasa opened his eyes to find the dark night replaced by bright lights. The vast forest had transformed into a magnificent palace. Rasa stood on a floor made of gold, surrounded by walls adorned with colorful, intricate carvings. Lanterns hung from above, illuminating the grand hall in a dazzling glow. Before him were 2 rows of red tables laden with all kinds of exquisite food and fine wine. At the far end of the palace stood 2 beautiful women. One was a petite girl with deep blue hair, while the other was a mature woman with long brown hair. Tajutsuhime stood beside Rasa. Upon seeing them, the blue-haired girl immediately spoke in a dismissive tone. "Is this the human the White Snake Sage-sama invited? He looks rather ordinary. Can I eat him?" The older woman covered her mouth and chuckled. Now, we can't act recklessly. He's a guest of the White Snake Sage-sama, after all." Tajutsuhime, standing beside Rasa, explained. "Rasa-sama, please don't misunderstand. These 2, like me, are trusted aides of the White Snake Sage-sama, Ichikishima-sama and Tagaru-sama. They are here to welcome you on the White Snake Sage-sama's orders." She then gestured toward a large red chair at the front of the hall. "Please, Rasa-sama. This banquet has been prepared especially for you." However, Rasa didn't move. He calmly glanced at the 3 women and said in a composed tone, "There's no need to use such illusions on me. I'm quite familiar with transformation techniques." The entire palace suddenly fell silent, as if a concert had been abruptly paused. The 3 women's expressions turned to shock, and then their beautiful faces began to twist, taking on serpentine features. They hissed, their voices turning eerie and manic. Kakik, as expected of a top-tier human ninja. What a shame. If only we could have eaten him. As they laughed, the lights in the palace flickered and went out, plunging the world into darkness. The surroundings began to distort and dissolve, the palace, the food, the wine, all vanishing like illusions. In their place was a dark, damp cave shrouded in deep mist. The world became eerily silent. Tajutsuheim and the other two women had also disappeared. Rasa looked around, slightly surprised. I have to admit, the White Snake Sage's people are impressive. Even I couldn't sense how they vanished. And this world, filled with natural energy, is interfering with my perception. Just then, he sensed something and looked ahead, his expression turning serious. It wasn't that his sensing abilities were exceptional, but the sheer volume of natural energy that suddenly appeared in his perception was overwhelming. Compared to this vast energy, the bit of sage chakra within him felt like a small boat adrift in an endless ocean. The immense pressure was palpable. In the silence of the cave, an aged voice echoed. So, Kazekage of Sunagakure, what do you think of Ryuchike's transformation techniques? As the voice faded, the mist in the cave dispersed, and a faint light illuminated the space. A massive white-scaled serpent, as large as a mountain, appeared before him. Chapter 132, The Secret Techniques of Ryuchi Cave. The once magnificent palace had now transformed into a massive cave. The surroundings were filled with dark, damp rocks, and the air was thick with moisture. At the far end of the cave stood a towering stone wall adorned with countless lanterns. At its center was a carved beast's head, its mouth holding a large scroll inscribed with 3 bold characters, Ryuchi Cave. Beneath the beast's head was an enormous stone chair. A colossal white-scaled serpent, as large as a mountain, lay coiled on the chair, a pipe in its mouth. Its emerald green eyes gleamed with intelligence as it gazed at Rasa, exhaling a puff of smoke. Below the white serpent stood a mane, Ichikishimaheim and Taguriheim, their demeanor obedient and respectful. Seeing the master of this place finally appear, Rasa focused his attention on the giant white snake and calmly replied to its question. Very impressive. Although I've also mastered transformation techniques, my current abilities only allow me to transform into familiar substances, and even then, only those with simple structures. To create something as complex as the food and palace you conjured, I truly cannot do that. This wasn't false modesty on Rasa's part. Since arriving in this world, Rasa had gained various abilities, but he had little time to deeply explore or develop any of them. To quickly acquire the power needed to control his own destiny, he had no choice but to hastily absorb and utilize these abilities. Hearing Rasa's words, the small girl, Ichikishimaheim, spoke in a haughty tone. Kakik! Human ninja, it seems you're quite good at flattery. But it's useless, this is Ryuchi Cave, after all. Rasa remained composed and replied. That's not it. I'm simply stating the truth. And as for flattery, if I recall correctly, wasn't it you who invited me here? The little girl's eyes widened, clearly annoyed. Beside her, the brown-haired Taguriheim chimed in. Is that so, human ninja? Weren't you also seeking out Ryuchi Cave? Though surprised that the snakes of Ryuchi Cave knew about his search, Rasa had a ready excuse. Oh? When did I ever seek out Ryuchi Cave? The little girl immediately seized on what she saw as a flaw in his words and said arrogantly. Kakik! What a lying human! But nothing you do can escape the notice of the White Snake Sage Sama. I heard from those humans from the land of the sea that you were searching for a place where giant snakes live. Are you going to deny that? Hearing this, Rasa roughly understood how his whereabouts had been exposed. Though he was curious about how his interactions with the merchants from the land of the sea had been discovered, it no longer mattered. No. I was searching for a place where giant snakes live, but that doesn't mean I was looking for Ryuchi Cave. Humph. Still trying to cover up even here? Humans really are full of lies. When it came to arguing and twisting words, these snakes of Ryuchi Cave were no match for Rasa. It's not a lie. While I am aware of Ryuchi Cave's existence, just like the other two great sage regions, given your ties with Konoha, I never imagined there would be any connection between us. Therefore, seeking out Ryuchi Cave would have been pointless for me. Tagarihime, however, remained skeptical. Is that so? Then why were you searching for a place where giant snakes live, Rasa-sama? Rasa didn't hide his intentions and even hoped to gain some information from Tagarihime. I've heard that near Ryuchi Cave, there's a group of humans who can naturally absorb natural energy. I'm simply interested in them. At this, the three attendants of the White Snake Sage were taken aback. They began to believe Rasa's words because, near one of Ryuchi Cave's exits, there indeed lived such a group of humans. Just then, the massive white-scaled serpent exhaled a puff of smoke and spoke in a grandmotherly voice. So, Kazekage of Sunagakure, are you searching for the Tenkumo clan? As soon as the White Snake Sage spoke, the three attendants fell silent. Rasa, however, was puzzled. The Tenkumo clan? He genuinely didn't know what clan Kimimaro or Jugo belonged to. If you're referring to the clan that can naturally absorb natural energy, then yes, that's the one. I've only heard of their existence and don't know much about the details. The sage nodded. That must be them. However, the ability to naturally absorb natural energy is extremely rare even within the Tenkumo clan. May I ask why you're searching for them, Kazekage? Rasa answered straightforwardly. Of course, it's because I'm interested in their innate ability to absorb natural energy. Ho! The White Snake Sage shifted slightly, its massive head rising as it stared at Rasa, its forked tongue flicking out. Kazekage, I can sense the pure natural energy within you. Even I have only felt such pure and powerful energy a very, very long time ago. With this energy, you shouldn't need the abilities of the Tenkumo clan, should you? Rasa didn't rush to explain. Instead, he first clarified. Sage energy, that's what I call the energy within me now. Sage energy? A fitting name. The White Snake Sage pondered for a moment before exhaling a series of smoke rings. Rasa then continued. While I've indeed mastered sage energy, I'm the only one who has. I have no idea how to help others achieve the same. As the Kazekage, it's only natural that I want others in my village to gain access to such powerful energy as well. I see. You truly are a responsible leader. The White Snake Sage sighed, then took a deep puff from its pipe. After exhaling a cloud of smoke that filled the cave, it looked at Rasa and asked. Then, Kazekage of Sunagakure, would you be willing to become the successor of Ryuchi Cave? Although Rasa had anticipated this possibility, he was still surprised when the White Snake Sage actually proposed it. Why? Don't you already have Orochimaru? The White Snake Sage seemed to fall into deep thought. Orochimaru? He is indeed a clever child. Unfortunately, the path he has chosen is not the one I envisioned for the future of Ryuchi Cave. The future of Ryuchi Cave? The White Snake Sage pondered for a long time before finally looking at Rasa and slowly posing a question. Kazekage, do you wish to transcend this fragile flesh and evolve into a dragon that soars through the heavens? Chapter 133, Trinity. To be honest, Rasa had considered many reasons why the White Snake Sage might want to meet him. But what the White Snake Sage had just said was completely beyond anything he had imagined. Evolve into a dragon. Was the White Snake Sage insane? Or had he wandered into the wrong story? Wasn't this the world of Naruto? What do you mean? Rasa could no longer remain calm. His brows furrowed deeply. Are you joking? Of course not. The White Snake Sage raised its massive head and looked at the enormous scroll held in the jaws of the beast statue behind it, inscribed with the words Ryuchi Cave. It then turned back to Rasa and asked, do you know why this place is called Ryuchi Cave? Rasa's frown deepened, his tone filled with disbelief. Are you saying that dragons once lived here? To Rasa's surprise, the White Snake Sage shook its head. No. This only deepened Rasa's confusion. Whether dragons ever existed in Ryuchi Cave is something even I cannot confirm. 1,000 years ago, when Kagaya Otsutsuki descended from another world and brought the Ten Tails to our planet, our world suffered immense destruction and corruption. The ancestors of Ryochi Cave perished one after another, and I am the only one who survived. The only thing passed down to me was this scroll, which clearly records a secret method for snakes to evolve into dragons. At this, the three girls sitting beneath the white snake sage also became visibly excited. Realizing that the white snake sage wasn't joking, Rasa's expression turned serious. Does this have something to do with why you invited me here? The white snake sage coiled its body again, its demeanor calm as it asked. Kazekage, what do you think is the difference between what you call senjutsu energy, natural energy, and chakra? Difference? Rasa thought for a moment before replying. There doesn't seem to be much difference, except that senjutsu energy doesn't contain the power of the Otsutsuki clan. The white snake sage didn't respond directly. Instead, it continued. You've already obtained the Dragon Vein Chakra and Morio's power, haven't you? If I'm not mistaken, the senjutsu energy you possess should also have the ability to absorb natural energy and chakra, gaining their abilities in the process, correct? Rasa didn't deny it. The white snake sage then asked. Have you ever wondered why senjutsu energy can absorb natural energy and chakra and acquire their abilities? Rasa was stunned. Why would he think about that? In his view, as a cheat ability, wasn't it natural for it to have such powers? Moreover, his cheat was the Kama, not senjutsu energy. However, the white snake sage's question reminded Rasa of something. During the vision shown to him by the divine tree, he had seen that the Kama within him was formed from purified chakra, condensed into pure senjutsu energy. In other words, the essence of the Kama's power was actually senjutsu energy? At this moment, the white snake sage asked another question that left Rasa deep in thought. Kazekage, since you've already mastered the ability of material transformation, you must have also gained control over inorganic reincarnation, correct? Rasa nodded. Then, Kazekage, don't you find these two abilities somewhat familiar? Especially for someone like you, who has reached the pinnacle of chakra mastery as a Kazekage. At first, Rasa didn't react, but the mention of chakra suddenly made him realize something. Are you talking about the nature transformation and shape transformation of chakra? Yes, the so-called material transformation ability of senjutsu energy was essentially the nature transformation of chakra, except that chakra could only transform between the 5 basic natures. And the inorganic reincarnation ability was essentially the shape transformation of chakra, except that it allowed control over inorganic matter in nature. So, are you saying that chakra is essentially senjutsu energy? Even natural energy is senjutsu energy? It's just that both chakra and natural energy have been tainted by the power of the Otsutsuki clan? The white snake sage praised him. What a clever human. Truly one of the finest among human shinobi. However, your understanding isn't entirely accurate. By this point, Rasa was tired of the riddles. So, white snake sage, what exactly are you trying to say? At this point, there's no need to beat around the bush, is there? Ho ho ho! The white snake sage chuckled lightly. You're right. There's no need for further mystery. The answer is simple: natural energy and chakra, when combined, form the complete senjutsu energy, the most primordial power of this world. In that instant, Rasa felt a sudden clarity. Yes, this explained why Rasa didn't need to mix chakra and natural energy like the sage modes of the 3 great sage regions. Senjutsu energy was already the combination of the two. The white snake sage continued its explanation. To be precise, 1,000 years ago, before Kagaya Otsutsuki descended, our world was filled with powerful senjutsu energy. It wasn't until the Otsutsuki arrived and used the Ten Tails to attempt to convert all the senjutsu energy in this world into chakra. Chakra! Why? Rasa was puzzled. If senjutsu energy is so powerful, why didn't they just consume it directly? Compared to senjutsu energy, chakra doesn't seem as powerful, does it? The sage smiled. Because they didn't have that ability. While the Otsutsuki clan is indeed powerful, they aren't omnipotent. To consume the energy of our world, they had to rely on the Ten-Tails to convert Senjutsu energy into chakra. Moreover, the Senjutsu energy of our world is special. Special? Yes. The White Snake Sage's voice took on a mysterious tone as it continued, seemingly unable to resist posing another riddle. What do you think the abilities of inorganic reincarnation and material transformation represent? What about it? Rasa tightened the wrinkles on his forehead. He really hated riddles, but he still pondered the question. Inorganic reincarnation and material transformation, one was about nature transformation, the other about shape transformation. Both seemed to revolve around the concept of transformation. Suddenly, Rasa had an answer. Are you talking about possibility? The White Snake Sage's gaze grew even more appreciative. Exactly. Life is a miraculous thing, and the Senjutsu energy that nurtures our world is even more so. This gave Kaguya Otsutsuki an opportunity, and she made a choice, to consume the chakra fruit, which was born from the Senjutsu energy of our world, ahead of time. Chapter 134, Rebirth and Transformation. Eaten early? This was something Rasa didn't know about. He only remembered that in the storyline, Kaguya Otsutsuki had eaten the chakra fruit, but whether she had eaten the complete chakra fruit, he wasn't sure. However, upon reflection, there were indeed some clues. The most obvious one was in the Boruto storyline, when Momoshiki Otsutsuki came to Earth searching for Kaguya. Nearly 1,000 years had already passed. As the controllers of the Ten-Tails, how could the Otsutsuki clan not know the maturation time of the divine tree? This meant that the time required for the divine tree to produce a mature chakra fruit must be around 1,000 years. Otherwise, the Otsutsuki clan wouldn't have taken so long to discover that Kaguya had stolen and eaten the chakra fruit. Kaguya Otsutsuki eating the chakra fruit 1,000 years early indicated that the chakra fruit she consumed was definitely not complete. Meanwhile, the White Snake Sage continued to explain. Yes, after eating the chakra fruit from the divine tree early, Kaguya Otsutsuki merged her will with our world, gaining immortality. Additionally, because she ate the chakra fruit prematurely, the natural energy of our world was not fully converted into chakra by the divine tree. However, due to Kaguya's influence, it split into two forms, chakra and natural energy. Now Rasa fully understood. However, he still had a question. So, what exactly is the influence of Kaguya Otsutsuki's consciousness, or rather, the Otsutsuki clan's influence, on natural energy? What's the difference between natural energy and Senjutsu energy? The White Snake Sage was impressed that Rasa had immediately asked the key question. It's simple. The reason the Otsutsuki clan uses the Ten-Tails to devour the energy of other planets is because the Otsutsuki clan has no future. No future? Yes. The reason life reproduces is because death is an unavoidable reality. Only through reproduction can life continue and evolve. However, the Otsutsuki clan possesses a secret technique that grants them near immortality. At this point, the White Snake Sage's emerald-green serpentine eyes glanced at Rasa. As the price for obtaining this technique, the Otsutsuki clan lost the ability to reproduce and evolve like ordinary life forms. This is why they rely on the power of the Ten-Tails. After Kaguya Otsutsuki merged with our world, the Otsutsuki clan's power also influenced natural energy. As a result, although Ryuchi Cave is one of the 3 most abundant sacred places of natural energy today, we have lost the ability to practice true Senjutsu and the chance to evolve from snakes into dragons. Here, the White Snake Sage finally revealed its true intentions. So, the reason you invited me here is to help Ryuchi Cave eliminate Kaguya Otsutsuki's consciousness, isn't it? Seeing that Rasa had figured out its true purpose, the White Snake Sage saw no need to hide it any longer. It openly admitted, that's correct. Rasa had no intention of refusing. Just as he had shared Senjutsu energy with Pakura and the others, he now urgently needed to expand the group of those who could use Senjutsu energy to face the impending crisis. He couldn't just agree like that. Then, what do I get in return? The White Snake Sage had anticipated this question and replied calmly. You can become the successor of Ryuchi Cave, contract with our summoning snakes, and learn the senjutsu of Ryuchi Cave. Rasa didn't show much enthusiasm. Sorry, but these conditions are a bit underwhelming for me. First, as the Kazekage of Sunagakure, I don't need the title of Ryuchi Cave's successor. I've already solved the issue of summoning creatures. As for Ryuchi Cave's senjutsu, it doesn't seem particularly useful to me now that I've mastered senjutsu energy. The White Snake Sage, however, wasn't flustered. A hint of human-like cunning flashed in its eyes. Don't be so quick to refuse. Don't you want to see the scroll behind me? It contains the unique senjutsu of Ryuchi Cave, as well as a secret technique that can transform you completely, the Dragon Transformation Technique. It would be a lie to say Rasa wasn't tempted, but he couldn't agree so easily. He needed to maintain control of the situation. So, he replied calmly. No. It's clear now that Ryuchi Cave isn't unique to me, but I am irreplaceable to you. So. Rasa didn't finish his sentence, but everyone present could see that he was preparing to drive a hard bargain. The three snake maidens looked furious, but the White Snake Sage remained composed and asked. So what? What conditions do you have? Feel free to state them. Rasa thought for a moment and, without appearing overbearing, said, In that case, let me take a look at the scroll containing Ryuchi Cave's senjutsu first. If we're going to make a deal, I should at least inspect the goods. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, is it? Not unreasonable. As soon as the White Snake Sage finished speaking, a mechanical sound came from the giant beast head behind it. The beast's mouth opened, and a massive scroll with the words Ryuchi Cave written on it floated down, landing in front of Rasa with a loud thud. Rasa looked at the scroll, which was several times larger than himself, and said to the White Snake Sage, Please help me open it. What a cautious human, the White Snake Sage remarked, glancing at Tajutsuheim. Tajutsuheim immediately understood and floated over to the scroll. Under her control, the massive scroll unfurled, revealing a series of techniques to Rasa. Rasa skimmed through them and found a few that piqued his interest. In addition to well-known abilities like the transformation technique and inorganic reincarnation, there were also techniques for levitation, invisibility, binding, petrification, jinjutsu, telekinesis, and more. At the very end of the scroll, the dragon transformation technique of Ryuchi Cave was revealed. Rasa only needed a quick glance to notice something interesting. The dragon transformation technique of Ryuchi Cave bore some similarities to the method of creating a Jinchuriki. In simple terms, it involved turning the practitioner into a Jinchuriki of natural energy. Through a special technique, an alternate space would be created within the practitioner's body. A practitioner capable of sensing natural energy would store it in this space, serving as the source of power and evolution for the practitioner. As the natural energy in this alternate space increased and the life force grew stronger, quantitative changes would lead to qualitative changes. These qualitative changes in natural energy would then flow through the body, triggering a chain reaction of evolution for the practitioner. This was the essence of Ryuchi Cave's dragon transformation technique. Seeing this, Rasa understood why the White Snake Sage had so generously shown him the scroll. To master Ryuchi Cave's techniques, two harsh conditions had to be met. Chapter 135, Contract. What does this mean? Rasa looked at the scroll, which stated that the key to mastering the dragon transformation technique was a scale from the White Snake Sage. He turned to the White Snake Sage with a puzzled expression. The White Snake Sage, looking as if it had everything under control, explained. As you can see, there are two conditions for mastering our Ryuchi Cave's dragon transformation technique. First, you must be able to sense and absorb the natural energy of Ryuchi Cave. Second, you must create an alternate space within your body to serve as a vessel for storing natural energy. What does that have to do with your scales? Rasa asked, still confused. Heh heh heh. The White Snake Sage let out a mysterious laugh and asked, Where do you think you are right now? Rasa was startled. He looked around and asked, Isn't this Ryuchi Cave? Heh heh heh. This time, the three snake maidens under the White Snake Sage also laughed. The White Snake Sage explained, This is indeed Ryuchi Cave, but it is also one of my scales. Rasa was truly shocked now. He looked around again and noticed something unusual. The space had no exits or entrances. It was completely a closed-off world. Tajutsuheim, with admiration in her voice, explained, Rasa-sama, the White Snake Sage's scales are the treasures of Ryuchi Cave. The White Snake Sage continued leisurely. Each of the 3 great sacred places has its own unique abilities. My ability is related to space. Every scale on my body is a small world I've nurtured over thousands of years by absorbing the natural energy of Ryuchi Cave. Though small, it means that anyone who obtains one of my scales gains control over a small world and the ability to sense Ryuchi Cave's natural energy. By implanting it into their body through a special method, they can meet the conditions to practice our dragon transformation technique. Now Rasa understood. How do I master it? Do I have to shove it into my heart? Heh. No need. You just have to eat it. As soon as the White Snake Sage finished speaking, one of its scales fell off and landed on the ground, transforming into a small white snake the size of a thumb. Seeing this, Rasa understood. However, precisely because of this, his initial interest in the dragon transformation technique quickly faded. That's a real shame. I have no interest in altering my body. The White Snake Sage seemed to have anticipated this. Heh, you don't need to. If I'm not mistaken, when you obtained Morio's power, you also gained the world he created, the land of demons, didn't you? Rasa's eyes narrowed. As expected of the White Snake Sage. You really do know everything, don't you? Heh. No need for such flattery. As I said, each of my scales is a small world, and each small world is connected to a part of the outside world. Therefore, no change in this shinobi world escapes my notice. After explaining, the White Snake Sage continued. Since you now possess the world created by Morio, you no longer need my scales. The next step is to implant the land of demons, created by Morio, into your body. At the same time, you must gain the ability to sense the natural energy of Ryuchi Cave. Once these 2 conditions are met, you can practice the dragon transformation technique. Rasa was half convinced by the White Snake Sage's words. It was true, as the White Snake Sage had said, that using the land of demons as a source of power and evolution was an excellent idea. But the question remained, how could he implant the land of demons into his body? And was the natural energy of Ryuchi Cave absolutely necessary? Couldn't he use his own senjutsu energy instead? Forgive my bluntness, but what's the difference between Ryuchi Cave's natural energy and senjutsu energy? The White Snake Sage flicked its forked tongue and let out an eerie laugh. I understand your thoughts. Indeed, fundamentally, there's no difference between the 2. You can still practice our dragon transformation technique using senjutsu energy, but the cost you'll pay will be different. What do you mean? Heh, it's simple. Just like the question I asked you earlier, what's the difference between our transformation technique and yours? The reason our transformation technique can create such complex forms of sustenance isn't just because we've practiced it longer, but also because of the unique properties of Ryuchi Cave's natural energy. Rasa suddenly understood. Are you saying that Ryuchi Cave's natural energy is easier to control? You could say that. The White Snake Sage then looked at Rasa and asked. If I'm not mistaken, you currently can't materialize your senjutsu energy, can you? The White Snake Sage was right. Ever since Rasa's chakra had disappeared and been replaced by senjutsu energy, he had been unable to materialize his senjutsu energy in the same way he could with chakra. Materialization referred to making energy visible, like the chakra cloak of a tailed beast. Rasa hadn't paid much attention to it before, thinking it was just a characteristic of senjutsu energy. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. Seeing Rasa fall silent, the White Snake Sage glanced at its 3 trusted aides. The 3 snake maidens immediately understood. Natural energy erupted from their bodies, surrounding them in a faint green aura. Under their control, the energy took the form of massive, translucent serpents. The White Snake Sage continued. Senjutsu energy is indeed incredibly powerful and full of infinite possibilities. However, precisely because of this, its state is chaotic and uncontrollable. But the natural energy of Ryuchi Cave, nurtured over countless generations by white snake sages, has become much more refined and manageable. Rasa fell into deep thought. Chaotic and uncontrollable, huh? If Rasa hadn't sensed the consciousness of the divine tree, he might have believed it. But of course, Rasa couldn't reveal that now. Moreover, at this point, Rasa realized that he might not need Ryuchi Kei's help to practice the so-called dragon transformation technique. With Senjutsu energy, he didn't necessarily need Ryuchi Kei's natural energy. As for implanting the land of demons into his body, he already had some ideas. He could draw inspiration from the sealing technique Minato Namikaze used to seal the Nine Tails into Naruto. It wasn't that Rasa was overly suspicious, but compared to the white snake sage of Ryuchi Cave, whom he had just met and whose depths he couldn't fathom, Rasa trusted Onoka, whom he could control, much more. However, since the other party had been so proactive and shown such goodwill, outright refusing would be impolite. With that in mind, Rasa made a decision. I'll need some time to consider the dragon transformation technique. However, it would be ungrateful of me to refuse Ryuchi Kei's generous offer. So, I can agree to become Ryuchi Kei's successor for now. As for the rest, please give me some time. No problem. The white snake sage was very accommodating. As long as Rasa agreed to become Ryuchi Kei's successor, Ryuchi Kei would have the upper hand. Everything else could be discussed later. Then, please sign your name on Ryuchi Kei's summoning contract. Just as Rasa accepted the invitation to become Ryuchi Kei's successor, the situation in the outside world was becoming even more unpredictable. Chapter 136, Winds of Change. Land of Fire, Konohagakure. In the base of the root. Although the third Hokage had long since dismissed Danzo and stripped him of his position as the leader of the root, Danzo still secretly commanded the root, choosing to remain in hiding. One reason was the massive losses suffered during the last mission in the Land of Rivers, and the other was to avoid provoking the Uchiha clan. However, this did not mean Danzo was idle. In the dimly lit room of the root's base, Danzo, who had lost an arm and an eye, sat on his high seat. Below him, three masked root ninja knelt on one knee. Danzo held a scroll in his left hand, scanning it with his single eye before furrowing his brow and asking, "When did Sunagakure become involved with the Shrine Maiden of the Land of Demons?" The leading root ninja immediately replied, "Reporting to Danzo-sama, according to intelligence received by our comrades in the Land of Demons, the Kazekage of Sunagakure appeared in the Land of Demons 3 days ago, fought the demon Morio, and defeated it." Morio! Danzo's left eye gleamed sharply. That legendary demon from the myths? Hi! Interesting. If I recall correctly, the small country of Ryuten, which has recently joined Sunagakure, also possesses the power of the Dragon Vein Chakra, correct? Hi! We sent people to investigate, and the city is now under the control of Sunagakure. Danzo's eyes grew even brighter. After a moment of thought, he said without hesitation, "Send this intelligence over." Understood. After his subordinates left, Danzo's face darkened with anger. He clutched his missing right arm, then regained his composure and slowly walked deeper into the root's base. This was a massive laboratory filled with the smell of disinfectant and countless glass containers, each holding a floating child. This was the root's secret laboratory, not built by Danzo but established by the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama. However, it now belonged to Danzo and Orochimaru. When Danzo entered, Orochimaru was deeply engrossed in some research. Without any pleasantries, Danzo asked, "So, Orochimaru, when can I transplant a new arm and eye?" For a ninja, losing an eye was a minor issue, but losing an arm significantly impacted combat ability. Danzo did not possess the ability to perform one-handed seals. Without turning his head, Orochimaru replied, "As for the arm, Danzo-sama, I can transplant one for you anytime. But if it's the cells of the first Hokage, without a Sharingan to suppress them, there's nothing I can do." Danzo did not press the matter. While a normal arm could restore some of his combat abilities, he had no plans to leave the village anytime soon. Moreover, his current disabled state earned him some sympathy within the village. Thus, Danzo casually brought up another topic, as if discussing everyday matters. I heard that Jiraiya and Minato are planning to take this opportunity to train at Mount Maiboku. Orochimaru chuckled darkly upon hearing this. They must be going to train in Sage Mode. Sage Mode. I've heard of it. Speaking of which, Ryuchi Cave is also a sacred place like Mount Maiboku. Doesn't it have its own Sage Mode? Orochimaru knew full well that Danzo was trying to stir up trouble between him and that fool Jiraiya, but he didn't care in the slightest. Ryuchi Cave does indeed have its own Sage Mode. However, the conditions for training in Sage Mode are extremely demanding. Hearing this, Danzo emitted a mysterious smile. Is that so? But in my opinion, Orochimaru, your talent in ninjutsu far surpasses that of Jiraiya and Minato. Kukuku. A hint of disdain flashed in Orochimaru's eyes as he chuckled softly but didn't respond. Seeing this, Danzo was prepared and continued. Just now, the root received news that the Shrine Maiden of the Land of Demons will visit the Kazekage of Sunagakure in 2 days. The reason is that the Kazekage helped the Land of Demons eliminate the demon Morio. This immediately piqued Orochimaru's interest. Morio. That terrifying demon from the myths of the Land of Demons? Indeed. The Dragon Vein. Morio. This is no coincidence, Orochimaru. The Kazekage likely went after the power of these demons. Over the past few months, you've seen the intelligence about Sunagakure's green miracle. The ability to alter Sunagakure's natural environment is not something an ordinary ninja could achieve. It's very likely the power of would release. Do you have concrete evidence? No, but we don't need it. Danzo's left eye narrowed. I've already passed this intelligence to Iwagakure, Kumogakure, and Kirigakure through the root. It seems to be working. Iwagakure and Kumogakure have halted their attacks on Konoha, which means suspicion has already taken root. Now, we just need to sit back and watch the show. Even if the intelligence about the Kazekage stealing bloodline limit is false, the fact that he has a survivor of the Uzumaki clan alone will be enough to make the Raikage and Tsuchikage take action. They're not the type to let others reap the benefits. Kukuku. It seems the shinobi world is about to become interesting again. Land of Earth, Iwagakure. Tsuchikage's office. Half a year had passed since Iwagakure and Konoha went to war. Although ninjas exist for the sake of war, a prolonged conflict lasting half a year had left the entire village of Iwagakure shrouded in exhaustion and unease. The exhaustion came from the ninjas who had been fighting in the war. The unease came from the fact that, even after all this time, Iwagakure had been unable to secure a decisive victory. It had to be said that Konoha, as the strongest shinobi village in the world, had an overwhelmingly deep foundation. Despite being attacked by 2 major villages, Konoha's defenses had held firm, and both Iwagakure and Kumogakure could feel Konoha's growing resilience, especially with the overwhelming power displayed by that young man, Namikaze Minato. Even Inoki felt a sense of dread. What made Inoki even more uneasy was that while they were fighting Konoha, Sunagakure, another of the 5 great shinobi villages, had been rapidly developing amidst the chaos. In fact, its growth had exceeded Inoki's expectations. Especially after the recent wave of intelligence about Sunagakure reached his hands, he was deeply alarmed. The cunning Inoki knew exactly where this intelligence came from, but even so, there was nothing he could do about it. This was Konoha's blatant scheme. The cells of the first Hokage, the Sharingan, a survivor of the Uzumaki clan, the Green Miracle, Dragon Vein, the Land of Demons. All of this told Inoki that Sunagakure was no longer the weakest of the 5 great shinobi villages. Instead, it was like a lurking beast, growing in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to devour everything in its path. The thought of the young man he had met in the Land of Birds, the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure, only deepened Inoki's unease. He could tolerate Konoha's existence, but he would never allow a second Konoha to emerge. With this in mind, Inoki quickly made up his decision. Chapter 137, The Sky Ninja and the Artisan Ninja. Land of Wind, Sunagakure. After signing the summoning contract with Ryuchi Cave and becoming its inheritor, Rasa chose to temporarily return to Sunagakure. He was just so damn busy. Although Saramu was now assisting him with some trivial matters and becoming more proficient, many major decisions in the village still required his final approval. In addition, Karura's pregnancy made him feel the need to set aside some time for family life. That night, Rasa returned to Sunagakure with Karura. As for Chiyo and the others, they remained in the Dragon Oasis, researching sage energy. Rasa had not informed Chiyo and the others about Karura's pregnancy. This wasn't Rasa's idea. In his view, since even Nono, a spy, knew about it, there was no need to hide it. Karura wasn't a Jinchuriki like Kushina, but Karura had refused, saying that while Rasa was her husband, he didn't belong solely to her but to the entire village. Yet, as his wife, she wished for moments when Rasa belonged only to her. To be honest, as a man, Rasa found it difficult to understand such subtle feminine thoughts, but he saw no reason to refuse. Of course, Rasa hadn't truly hidden it from everyone. Besides Nono, Yashimaru, his brother-in-law, also knew about his sister's pregnancy. Thus, after spending half a day with his wife as an ordinary couple, Rasa had no choice but to return to his duties as Kazekage. Have Chiyo-sama and the others not returned yet? In the Kazekage's office, Rasa, dressed in casual home clothes, asked as he looked at the returned Baki. "Hi!" The two elders and Temari and Midori-sama are still there, training diligently. Baki hesitated before adding. Reporting to the Kazekage-sama, Chiyo-sama mentioned that the conditions in the Dragon Oasis are much better than in the village. If the Kazekage-sama agrees, Chiyo-sama would like to move there permanently. This was something Rasa hadn't expected. After some thought, he agreed. No problem. Inform Chiyo-sama and the others that they are free to live there, but they must not neglect their duties in the village. After all, in Rasa's vision, Sunagakure would eventually relocate to the Dragon Oasis. At that moment, Saramu, dressed as a secretary, knocked and entered, respectfully saying, "Kazekage-sama, they have arrived." "Good, let them in." Shortly after, under Saramu's guidance, 6 distinctive individuals entered. Upon seeing Rasa seated on the high platform, the 6 immediately knelt and saluted. "We pay our respects to the Kazekage-sama." "HN." Rasa nodded, allowing them to rise before saying, "Introduce yourselves." The elderly man with a kind demeanor and white hair exchanged a wary glance with a man in armor. Finally, the elderly man stepped forward and spoke first. "Then, allow this old man to begin." With that, he took a step forward and bowed slightly. "I am Shino, from the Hidden Sky Village. After our village was destroyed by Konoha in the last great Shinobi War, I have been wandering the Shinobi world. Upon hearing of Sunagakure's great victory over Konoha, I came here and saw the announcement you posted in the village. I wish to join Sunagakure. My request is simple: if I can solve the problem you have proposed, I humbly ask that Sunagakure help us avenge the destruction of the Hidden Sky Village." Rasa nodded. Although he vaguely remembered the plot and knew that Shino likely had ulterior motives for coming to Sunagakure, he had no intention of exposing him. He genuinely needed the Hidden Sky Village's technology to solve Sunagakure's transportation issues. Moreover, if he recalled correctly, the Hidden Sky Village had a tailed beast without a tail, the Zero Tail. Rest assured, even without the Hidden Sky Village, our conflict with Konoha is a fight to the death. However, all conflicts and battles are based on the interests of Sunagakure. Shino smiled. "Please rest easy, Kazekage-sama. I understand this principle and will not cause you any trouble." Rasa then turned his attention to the other 5 individuals. The man dressed in armor, resembling a samurai, immediately stepped forward and bowed. "I am Hoki. The 3 behind me are my subordinates. We are from the Takumi village, village of artisans, and specialize in crafting ninja tools. We have come here to seek Sunagekire's protection for our village, to avoid exploitation by the other great nations. Compared to the Hidden Sky village, Rasa had a deeper impression of the Takumi village. On one hand, some of the ninja tools they created were considered the origin of scientific ninja tools, possessing various incredible abilities. On the other hand, the village's founder shared the same name as the legendary Onmyoji, Saimai. Rest assured, as long as you can help Sunagakure solve our transportation issues, we will not treat you unfairly. However, I am curious, did you know each other before this? Shino answered. Yes, Hoki and I did not know each other before. We only met by chance on our way to Sunagakure. Hoki also nodded in agreement. Yes, Kazekage-sama. Although our Takumi village has some expertise in crafting ninja tools, I am well aware that solving Sunagakure's transportation problem cannot be achieved with tools alone. I have heard of the Hidden Sky village's past technology, which is why I invited Shino to collaborate. I see. Hearing this, Rasa felt somewhat reassured. So, do you have any ideas now? Both nodded, and Hoki pulled out a scroll from his robe. Please allow me to present the design, Kazekage-sama. Proceed. Under Baki's watchful gaze, Hoki stepped forward and unrolled the scroll on Rasa's desk. What appeared before everyone was a vehicle resembling a ship. What is this? We call it the desert ship. It is a vessel that treats the desert as an ocean, using wind-based chakra as its power source. Rasa was momentarily stunned, unable to process the idea. Treating the desert as an ocean and making a ship sail on sand. Is that possible? Kazekage-sama, it is possible. We have carefully studied the deserts of the Land of Wind. The sand is very fine and smooth, creating minimal resistance for the ship. By harnessing wind-based chakra and the natural winds of the desert, the ship's sails can propel it across the sand. Although Hoki explained it convincingly, Rasa still had his doubts. In his mind, the solution to Sunagakure's transportation problem was something like a train or the lightning rail from Boruto, which used lightning-based chakra as its energy source. However, since he wasn't a professional, he decided not to dismiss the idea outright. It's an interesting concept. You may proceed with building a prototype of the desert ship. Sunagakure will provide all the necessary funds. Once it's completed, we can evaluate its effectiveness. In addition, I would like you to research another mode of transportation that I have in mind. Chapter 138, Training at Mount Maiboku. Rasa explained his idea about trains, or more specifically, the lightning rail. In simple terms, it involved laying tracks on land and using lightning-based or fire-based chakra, or any energy source that could serve as propulsion, to create vehicles that could run on these tracks. The 6 individuals present were momentarily stunned. What? Is it impossible? No. It was Hoki who answered. Kazekage-sama, Shino and I have considered this idea before, but we dismissed it because, given the terrain around Sunagakure, laying tracks on the desert would be extremely difficult. I see. So it's a geological issue, then? What if I told you I have a way to alter the terrain, turning the desert into solid land? Both Shino and Hoki were taken aback, their eyes gleaming with excitement. Clearly, they assumed Rasa was referring to the power of a tailed beast. Shino immediately spoke up. If the Kazekage-sama possesses such power, then we would certainly be willing to give it a try. Then I leave it to you. As long as you produce results, Sunagakure will not treat you unfairly. With that, Rasa turned to Saramu. Saramu, from now on, you will be responsible for coordinating with these 6. Provide them with whatever they need. If there's anything you can't decide on, bring it to me. Hi! Saramu understood her role perfectly. Kazekage-sama, I will take them to get settled. The 6 individuals, having achieved their goal, bowed to Rasa and took their leave. After they had left, Baki approached Rasa and asked, Kazekage-sama, should we keep an eye on them? Rasa nodded. Yes, keep an eye on them. While these 6 have their own agendas, their technology is something we need. Select some intelligent individuals to assist them. If possible, learn their techniques. Baki immediately understood Rasa's intentions. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I will handle it right away. HN. Go ahead. After Baki left, Rasa summoned the 9 members of the Covert Operations Unit. Although Rasa was a transmigrator, he didn't always remember every detail of the plot unless a character appeared to remind him, as had just happened. I have 2 tasks for you. First, investigate the Hidden Sky Village, focusing on their technology and a creature known as the Zero Tails. Second, investigate the Hidden Craftsman Village, paying special attention to their founder and their techniques for crafting unique ninja tools. Hi! As the Covert Operations Unit departed, Rasa felt a sense of anticipation. Whether it was the power of the Zero Tails or the scientific ninja tools of the Hidden Craftsman Village, both could significantly strengthen him and Sunagakure. However, those were matters for the future. For now, the most important thing was to improve his personal strength and the village's overall power. His next focus in training would remain the 8 gates. Additionally, he had decided to integrate the latest chakra fruit he had obtained from Morio into the divine tree, increasing the concentration of natural energy in the Dragon Oasis. This would help Temari and the others master Sage energy more quickly and accelerate his own training progress. Land of Fire, Konohagakure. Due to the easing of the front lines, Minato was finally able to withdraw from the battlefield. However, Minato knew he had no time to rest. After returning from the front lines, he spent only a day at home before seeking out his teacher, Jiraiya, to request training in Sage mode at Mount Maiboku. Jiraiya, of course, agreed. Thus, at dawn, Jiraiya arrived at Minato's home. Kukuku, I hope I'm not interrupting you 2 lovebirds. As soon as he entered, Jiraiya's face broke into a mischievous grin upon seeing his disciple and Kushina glowing with happiness. This caused Kushina's cheeks to flush red while a vein popped on her forehead. Minato, slightly embarrassed, invited Jiraiya in warmly. Jiraiya-sensei, you haven't had breakfast yet, right? Join us. Jiraiya, of course, didn't hesitate. Sure. It's been a while since I've tasted Kushina's cooking. And so, the teacher and student sat at the dining table, chatting while Kushina reluctantly headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Soon, Kushina had breakfast ready. As she watched the 2 eat, she asked, Jiraiya-sensei, how long will you and Minato be gone this time? Jiraiya thought for a moment. It's hard to say. Sage mode training is extremely difficult. Although Minato is exceptionally talented, I can't predict how long it will take. However, at this point, Jiraiya laughed heartily and reassured her. At least he won't be on the battlefield, right? Hearing this, Minato's expression darkened slightly, but Kushina breathed a sigh of relief. Minato then asked, Jiraiya-sensei, I heard that the Kazekage of Sunagakure defeated the demon Morio of the Land of Demons? At this, Jiraiya's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. That's right. It's truly unbelievable. That legendary demon actually exists, it's even older than the tailed beasts. The fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure is becoming more and more enigmatic. I heard from the ANBU that the Kazekage displayed techniques similar to the 4 violet flames formation and the adamantine sealing chains. As soon as these words were spoken, Jiraiya's expression turned grave, and Kushina trembled slightly. Jiraiya, of course, knew the reason. If my guess is correct, the 4 violet flames formation was likely stolen by Danzo. As for the adamantine sealing chains, they're probably related to the Uzumaki girl the Kazekage took from Kazekage. This caused Kushina's expression to darken further. Although Kushina had been brought to Konoha at a very young age and didn't know the name Hana, the mere fact that there was another Uzumaki out there made her feel less alone. She longed to meet this fellow clansman, but their current circumstances made it impossible. Seeing this, Jiraiya shared what he knew. According to the information we gathered from Kazekage, when the Uzumaki clan was destroyed by Kirigakure, the clan had secretly sent away some of the more talented children. That little girl, Hannah, must be one of them. Minato, seeing the sadness in his wife's eyes, took the opportunity to reassure her. Don't worry, Kushina. I'll do my best to help you find the other Uzumaki scattered across the shinobi world. Kushina nodded gently. And so, breakfast was quickly finished, and it was time for the two to depart. Kushina wanted to see them off, but as soon as she stepped outside, two ANBU members appeared in front of her, blocking her path. Apologies, Minato-sama, Jiraiya-sama. Kushina-sama cannot leave the barrier's range. Compared to the ANBU's usual stern demeanor, their tone was much softer this time. After all, they knew that the next Hokage would undoubtedly be Minato. Jiraiya, ever the mediator, laughed it off. Alright, Kushina, no need to see us off. Fukasaku-sama will summon us soon using the reverse summoning technique. Kushina, wait for me to return. Minato didn't say much, simply hugging Kushina tightly. And so, with a puff of smoke, Jiraiya and Minato disappeared from sight. Chapter 139, The Great Toad Sage. As the scenery before their eyes shifted, Jiraiya and Minato found themselves in Mount Myaboku in an instant. Jiraiya, long accustomed to the reverse summoning technique, and Minato, a master of space-time ninjutsu, naturally felt no discomfort. While Jiraiya was already familiar with Mount Myaboku, this was Minato's first visit. Before them stretched a forest filled with gigantic plants. Vines and leaves rested on the branches, where various frogs and enormous insects lounged. In the distance, a massive waterfall flowed with what appeared to be oil, flanked by numerous toad statues. Just as Minato was marveling at the beauty of Mount Myaboku, a familiar voice reached his ears. You've arrived, Jiraiya, Minato. Fukasaku-sama, it's been a while. Jiraiya, as carefree as ever, greeted the small toad, while Minato bowed politely. Greetings, Fukasaku-sama. The small toad, Fukasaku, couldn't help but tease Jiraiya. Jiraiya, you should learn a thing or two from your student. Always so carefree, no wonder you still can't master perfect sage mode. With that, Fukasaku turned the large toad beneath him and said, Follow me. The great toad sage is waiting for you. The great toad sage. Minato was startled. He knew of the great toad sage's existence, a being said to have lived for over 1,000 years, the founder of Mount Myaboku. Jiraiya was also surprised. The great toad sage? What does he want with me and Minato? Fukasaku's expression turned serious. The great toad sage has had another dream. Jiraiya was shocked, his face growing solemn. The last time the great toad sage had a dream, it was about the child of prophecy. Minato, who had heard Jiraiya speak of the child of prophecy before, quickly connected the dots. And so, the two followed in silence. Before long, they arrived at a massive palace. The grand hall was vast and empty, save for a colossal stone throne at the far end. Seated upon it was an enormous, brown-skinned toad wearing a hat and a necklace with the character 4 oil hanging from it. This was the founder of Mount Myaboku, the great toad sage. Behind the toad throne stood rows of towering scrolls. When Fukasaku led Jiraiya and Minato into the hall, the great toad sage appeared to be dozing. It was only after Fukasaku's reminder that the great toad sage slowly opened his eyes. Ah, it's Jiraiya, and your student, Minato. The great toad sage's words shocked Jiraiya. In his memory, the great toad sage's memory was poor, often forgetting his name as if suffering from dementia. Yet this time, not only did he remember Jiraiya, but he also knew Minato's name. At that moment, Jiraiya felt an unusual tension in the air. Minato, meanwhile, bowed respectfully. Minato Namikaze, at your service, great toad sage. Ah! The great toad sage's voice remained aged and trembling. What an outstanding young man. I sense a familiar, vast chakra within you. Minato was startled and wanted to ask what the great toad sage meant, but the ancient toad had already shifted his gaze to Jiraiya, ignoring him. Jiraiya, I had Fukasaku bring you here to tell you something important. As both Jiraiya and Minato grew tense, the great Toad Sage began to recount his dream. The dream has vanished. The great Toad Sage's 4 simple words left Jiraiya utterly bewildered. The dream has vanished? What does that mean? The great Toad Sage, however, seemed to lapse into a daze and fell silent. Seeing this, Fukasaku stepped in to explain on behalf of the great Toad Sage. Jiraiya, do you remember the prophecy the great Toad Sage once gave you? How could Jiraiya forget? But recently, the great Toad Sage had another dream. In this dream, all the visions related to you have disappeared. Jiraiya was completely stunned. The dreams about him had vanished. What did that mean? Meanwhile, Minato, who had been deep in thought, looked up and asked Fukasaku. Fukasaku-sama, does the great Toad Sage mean that the future has changed? Finally, Jiraiya understood. Unfortunately, Fukasaku shook his head. No. The great Toad Sage's dreams do not necessarily mean the future has changed. But one thing is certain, the future has become unpredictable. Even the great Toad Sage can no longer see it clearly. At that moment, both Jiraiya and Minato fell into deep thought, and the grand hall fell silent. After a long pause, Jiraiya took a deep breath and asked, "What about the Child of Prophecy?" Fukasaku shook his head again. Jiraiya's pupils contracted sharply. He had spent most of his life searching for the Child of Prophecy, and now the great Toad Sage was telling him that the Child of Prophecy no longer existed. Minato, however, saw things more clearly. So, is this a good thing or a bad thing? It was the great Toad Sage, seemingly lost in his thoughts, who answered in a slow, trembling voice. From now on, the fate of the entire shinobi world lies in your own hands. With that, the great Toad Sage yawned and fell asleep. Fukasaku bowed to the sleeping sage and then led the bewildered Jiraiya and contemplative Minato out of the hall. Once they were back in the forest, Jiraiya couldn't help but ask, confused. What exactly is going on? Fukasaku sighed and explained. I'm not entirely sure myself. The great Toad Sage suddenly told me that our world has undergone some unpredictable changes. Unpredictable changes? Exactly. Half a year ago, the great Toad Sage sensed it, but the change was so sudden that even he couldn't confirm it. However, last night, that change appeared again, and the great Toad Sage finally confirmed it. It's a massive energy unlike chakra or natural energy, and its source lies to the west of the Land of Fire. To the west? Minato was startled, as if he had thought of something, while Jiraiya frowned and asked. Even the great Toad Sage can't pinpoint its exact location? Fukasaku shook his head. Just like how you, who haven't mastered Sage Mode, can't sense natural energy, this new energy can only be faintly sensed by the great Toad Sage. Even Shima and I can't perceive it at all. This left Jiraiya deep in thought. Fortunately, Fukasaku offered some reassurance. Don't worry, Jiraiya, Minato. As the great Toad Sage said, a change in the future isn't necessarily a bad thing. Whether it's good or bad ultimately depends on your choices. For now, rest up. Your current state isn't suitable for Sage Mode training. I'll come find you later. Understood. After Fukasaku left, Jiraiya turned to his disciple, who had been silent and frowning, and asked, Minato, have you thought of something? Minato nodded, his eyes lighting up as he said to Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sensei, do you remember what Danzo said about being unable to sense the Fourth Kazekage's chakra? And the West. Jiraiya's pupils shrank instantly. Chapter 140, The Daimyo makes an appearance. Land of Wind, Sunagakure. As the first light of dawn broke, the villagers of Sunagakure woke from their slumber and opened their doors and windows to begin a new day. However, the sight that greeted them made them rub their eyes in disbelief, wondering if they were still dreaming. Overnight, the massive, barren rock walls that surrounded Sunagakure had transformed. Countless patches of green now dotted the once lifeless cliffs, with lush trees sprouting from the rocks and green vines draping over the steep walls, turning the desolate village into a vibrant oasis. When the villagers stepped outside and saw the green plants and colorful flowers blooming in every corner of the village, they were utterly speechless. Is this still our village? The once sandstorm-ravaged Sunagakure was slowly transforming into a thriving, green world. Everyone, whether villagers or visiting merchants, stepped out of their homes, marveling at the miraculous changes as if witnessing a divine act. The villagers of Sunagakure were somewhat accustomed to this, as they had already witnessed the green miracle over the past 6 months. However, outsiders, especially spies from other villages, were completely stunned. They had long suspected that Sunagakure's green miracle was unusual, but this display of power, which could only be described as divine, left them in awe. They quickly relayed all the information back to their respective villages. Meanwhile, the changes in the Dragon Oasis were even more astonishing. In just one night, the forested area of the Dragon Oasis had doubled in size. The high-ranking officials of Sunagakure who were training there witnessed this miraculous event firsthand. The previous night, Rasa had arrived at the Dragon Oasis. At first, no one thought much of it and continued their attempts to sense the natural energy in the area. However, shortly after Rasa entered the Dragon Oasis, they witnessed something that left them utterly dumbfounded. From the edge of the Dragon Oasis, they watched as the desert beneath their feet transformed. Plants sprouted and spread rapidly, growing from seedlings to the thickness of a tree trunk in just one night. The forest expanded before their eyes, stretching as far as they could see. This. If it weren't for Baki, who had seen this before and reassured everyone, they might have rushed to investigate immediately. By the next morning, when Rasa reappeared, everyone looked at him as if he were a god. They wanted to ask what had happened, but in the end, they held their tongues. However, at that moment, they became convinced. Perhaps the power Rasa wielded was not the wood release of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Rasa, however, had no intention of explaining. After encouraging everyone to continue their training, he left with Baki. Back in the Kazekage's office in Sunagakure, Rasa had just returned when Saramu eagerly reported the day's changes in the village and the enthusiastic reactions of the villagers. After roughly understanding the situation, Rasa instructed, "No need to panic. Just let them know that our village is getting better and better." Saramu, of course, knew not to ask too many questions and nodded in agreement. Rasa then thought for a moment and added, "By the way, issue an order in the name of the Kazekage. Starting today, villagers are prohibited from intentionally damaging the green plants that have appeared in the village. Since those 3 children were able to gain the power of natural energy by protecting plants, perhaps others can too." Understood. Saramu nodded, noting it down, and then began to discuss another matter. "We've received word from the Land of Demons. The Shrine Maiden of the Land of Demons, Miroku-sama, plans to visit Sunagakure in 5 days. 5 days? That's fine. Handle the arrangements carefully. Receive her with the same protocol as we would for a daimyo." This wasn't Rasa playing favorites. Although Saramu was also the queen of Ryuten, Ryuten's land area and population were far smaller compared to the Land of Demons. Rasa couldn't afford to be discourteous. "Is there anything else?" "Yes." Saramu nodded, her expression slightly peculiar. "The daimyo has sent an envoy." "The daimyo?" At these words, Rasa was momentarily stunned before he realized what was being said. The daimyo, for him, it was indeed a somewhat unfamiliar term. Since they were specifically referring to the daimyo, it had to be the daimyo of the Land of Wind. Since arriving in this world, Rasa had never had any contact with this daimyo. Even in his memories, Rasa had only met the daimyo of the Land of Wind once, when he became the Kazekage. After all, with Rasa's previous personality, he wasn't the type suited for political maneuvering. In the past, such matters had been handled by Ebizo. Later, after the successful raid on the Land of Fire, which secured enough military funds for Sunagakure and temporarily freed the village from the daimyo's control, contact between the two had become even rarer. "What does the daimyo want?" Saramu shook her head. "I'm not sure. The envoy said he must speak to you personally to convey the daimyo's orders." "Orders?" Although Rasa was somewhat displeased, he still had Saramu bring the envoy in. The man who entered was a samurai dressed in black and red armor, with a stern expression and a long sword at his waist. Upon seeing Rasa, he showed no signs of disrespect and knelt respectfully, holding up a scroll with both hands. "I am Oda, a retainer of the daimyo. I have come to deliver a personal letter from the daimyo to the Kazekage-sama." A retainer, or samurai teisho, was a high-ranking samurai tasked with protecting the daimyo. Rasa could sense that the man before him possessed considerable chakra, at least at the level of a jonin. It seemed the daimyo had quite a few skilled samurai in his service. Rasa had Saramu take the scroll and open it. Upon reading it, he was surprised. The contents of the scroll were simple. The Land of Wind had received a joint letter from the Land of Earth and the Land of Lightning. The two nations, on behalf of their respective villages, expressed a desire to form an alliance with Sunagakure to jointly attack the Land of Fire. The daimyo of the Land of Wind had sent an envoy to consult Rasa and seek his opinion. This was somewhat unexpected for Rasa. Based on the daimyo's previous behavior, he would have simply issued a direct order. It seemed that Sunagakure's successful campaigns against Konoha over the past 6 months had significantly raised the village's standing in the daimyo's eyes. After Rasa finished reading the scroll, the samurai named Oda spoke again. "Reporting to the Kazekage-sama, the Land of Earth and the Land of Lightning have shown great sincerity. They have even expressed a willingness to send ninja from their villages to Sunagakure to discuss the alliance. The daimyo's opinion is that, if possible, the Kazekage-sama should not refuse. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If the three great nations join forces, the Land of Fire will surely fall. The fertile lands of the Land of Fire will then be divided among the three nations. With the Kazekage-sama's leadership, the Land of Wind is certain to claim the largest share." Chapter 141, Trouble Approaches. Listening to Oda's words, Rasa did not rush to respond. Although the contents of the letter seemed reasonable, a common practice in the shinobi world, the moment he read it, Rasa sensed a whiff of conspiracy. Instinctively, he thought of Inoki's scheming face. This alliance proposal probably doesn't come from the daimyo of the two great nations, but from the Reikage and Tsuchikage behind them. Yet, he did not refuse. For one, as the Kazekage, it would be unwise to openly disrespect the daimyo. Secondly, he wanted to see what game the Tsuchikage and Reikage were playing. Since this is the daimyo-sama's wish, Sunagakure naturally has no objections. "Please inform him that we welcome shinobi from Kumogakure and Iwagakure to our village. Of course, whether an alliance is formed will depend on the negotiations." Oda bowed respectfully. "I understand, Kazekage-sama. Then, with your permission, I shall take my leave and report back to the daimyo." Good work. Saramu, see him out." Watching Oda depart, Baki, standing nearby, narrowed his eyes warily. "Kazekage-sama, the daimyo's order seems suspicious, right?" Unlike others, Baki, as the head of the ANBU, had little time for training the thoughts. While Saramu, as Rasa's assistant, handled many of the village's public affairs, matters concerning security, shinobi operations, and covert missions fell under the ANBU's jurisdiction, and this was Baki's expertise. "Oh? Why do you say that?" Baki answered decisively. "It's too sudden. Kumogakure and Iwagakure didn't form an alliance when attacking Kanagakure, yet now they're suddenly reaching out to us. And the timing, it's strange." Rasa nodded in approval. "It is unusual. But whatever their goal, we must meet them. By the way, has the ANBU received any intelligence regarding the daimyo?" Baki tensed slightly. "Reporting, Kazekage-sama, under the Third Kazekage-sama's orders, to avoid unnecessary complications, the ANBU never stationed operatives near the daimyo." "Is that so?" Rasa understood. Unlike Konoha, which, due to its wealth, was less dependent on the fire daimyo, Sunagakure's past poverty had enforced stricter deference to the wind daimyo's authority. This made the ANBU hesitant to plant spies in the daimyo's court. "But this can't continue. The daimyo's sudden involvement made Rasa realize the need to monitor this influential faction. Rasa smiled and issued a knowing order. The daimyo-sama's safety must not be neglected. Hi! As the ANBU commander, Baki immediately grasped the implication. Good. Dismissed. With another bow, Baki exited, leaving Rasa alone in the Kazekage's office. He leaned back in his chair, slowly contemplating the letter from the daimyo in his hands, then slightly narrowed his gazes. He realized that the timing of this letter's arrival carried implications far beyond just the Otsutsuki and Reikage scheming something. More importantly, it likely meant that Kumogakure and Iwagakure now viewed Tsunegakure's rise as a threat nearly on par with Konohagakure. This was not good news. Until now, Tsunegakure had been able to maneuver skillfully in this war precisely because it was considered the weakest among the 5 great shinobi villages. The surprise attack on the Land of Fire and the cooperation with Kumogakure and Iwagakure had all been built upon the other villages' underestimation of Tsunegakure. But now, after the crushing defeat in the Land of Rivers, Konoha could no longer afford to look down on Tsunegakure. Similarly, Iwagakure and Kumogakure had begun taking them seriously. This means that Tsunegakure's strategy of navigating between the 5 great villages would have to change. Still, no matter what the future held, true strength was what mattered most. At present, Tsunegakure's overall military power remains lacking. First, in terms of basic shinobi numbers, primarily Jinin and Chunin, Tsunegakure still fell far short compared to the other great villages. From what this great shinobi war had shown so far, whether it was Konoha, Kumogakure, or Iwagakure, each had at least 7,000 to 8,000 shinobi. Even after half a year of development, Tsunegakure's forces numbered only a little over 3,000. This was nowhere near the others, and worse, it wasn't something that could be quickly remedied. Even if they resorted to desperate measures like throwing children onto the battlefield, it wouldn't make a meaningful difference. And, author here isn't wrong about the number of ninjas since he is distributing according to the number in the Fourth War, which is itself a plot hole in the original source. As for mid-tier shinobi, the Jonin, the gap between Tsunegakure and the other villages wasn't as severe. After all, at the Jonin level, unlike the expendable Jinin and Chunin, casualties were far less frequent on the battlefield. Still, a gap undoubtedly existed. Fortunately, there was a solution. If they could quickly establish the spatial passage between Tsunegakure and the Island of Summons, allowing Tsunegakure's Jonin to control the giant summoning beasts there, this gap could be closed, perhaps even reversed. Then came the upper-tier shinobi, those at the Kage level. Here, Tsunegakure wasn't at as much of a disadvantage. Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, and Michikawa might not hold the title of Kage, but in terms of strength, they were undoubtedly at that level. If absolutely necessary, even Bunpuku could be deployed to compensate for the difference in tailed beast Jinchuriki. Finally, there were the true Kage-level powerhouses. This was where Rasa felt most confident. At his current strength, aside from Konoha's Minato and Jiraiya, as well as Iwagakure's Inoki, the latter primarily due to the threat of his dust release, there were few he needed to fear. From this perspective, in a one-on-one scenario, Tsunegakure had no reason to fear any single village. But if it came to anything else, that would be troublesome. And given that Kumogakure and Iwagakure had suddenly proposed an alliance, Rasa couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. At this thought, the brief respite he had considered taking due to Karura's pregnancy was overtaken by urgency once more. Truly, there's no stopping. But aside from the Forgotten Island to summon beasts, how else could Tsunegakure rapidly strengthen itself to face future crises? After some consideration, Rasa realized the only immediate option was still Senjutsu Chakra. If Pakura and Michikawa could master Senjutsu energy faster, their power would increase dramatically, elevating them to the level of shinobi like Minato and Jiraiya, capable of fighting armies alone. That would significantly lessen the burden on Rasa's shoulders. But how to achieve this? After some thought, Rasa wondered if the White Snake Sage of Ryochi Cave might have a solution. With that in mind, he wasted no time. Forming the necessary hand seals, he summoned Lady Tagetsuhime. Chapter 142, Shinobi Sect. Dragon's Oasis. After a night of dramatic transformation, the environment where Chiyo and the others resided had shifted from the border between desert and forest to a dense, thriving woodland. With Rasa's approval, Chiyo had moved her home from Sunagakure to this place, building a small courtyard. Her younger brother, Ebizo, naturally followed suit without hesitation. Where their master went, their disciples, Hana and Onoka, were sure to follow. Seeing the actions of the two elders, Pakura also considered relocating. After all, compared to Sunagakure's windswept, sand-choked environment, this place was practically paradise. But after some thought, Pakura dismissed the idea. Unlike Chiyo and Ebizo, who had retreated from the front lines, Pakura still had many responsibilities tied to the village. She represented the commoner faction of Sunagakure. Michikawa was in the same position. Though he had no intention of moving here, he contemplated asking Rasa for permission to let his son, Komi, stay here during vacations. Having witnessed the formidable power of Senjutsu chakra, he hoped his child could one day master it. Of course, he understood that haste was not the answer. And so, they each settled into their new lives here, their enthusiasm for the immense power of Senjutsu keeping them wholly absorbed. It had already been 2 days since any of them returned to the village. As for Karura, Baki, and Yashimaru, they had left much earlier. Karura, being pregnant, was no longer suited for training, as they worried it might affect the child. Besides, her duties at the orphanage kept her occupied. Baki, as the ANBU commander, was buried in endless tasks. Yashimaru, though his status as Chiyo's disciple had become somewhat nominal after she took on the exceptionally talented Hana, remained unbothered. His easygoing nature prevented any resentment, and he had found a new purpose at Sunagakure's expanded hospital. Needing a skilled medical need to oversee operations, Rasa had assigned Yashimaru to the post, and to everyone's surprise, he excelled in the role. When Rasa returned to the oasis, Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, Michikawa, Hana, Onoka, and Bunpuku quickly gathered upon receiving the news. Though they all lived here now, each had chosen slightly separate training grounds. As shinobi, secrecy was second nature, especially when it came to personal techniques and hidden arts. Yet, Rasa's sudden reappearance surprised them. First, he had only left that morning, returning so soon was unusual. Second, the strikingly beautiful girl accompanying him was unfamiliar to all except Onoka and Bunpuku. Pakura studied the girl for a moment before asking Rasa, "Did something happen in the village?" Rasa nodded and handed her the daimyo's letter without delay. Apart from Bunpuku, Hana, and Onoka, the other 4 took turns reading the letter. After understanding its contents, they too sensed something amiss. Ebizo, who had once been responsible for such matters as an elder, immediately grasped the daimyo's intention. "The daimyo is testing us?" The others were baffled by those words. Testing? Indeed. Although the 5 great shinobi villages were initially established as independent yet cooperative equals with their respective nations, over time, due to military funding, we've inevitably become subordinate and dependent, especially Sunagakure, which suffered the most. However, half a year ago, after Kazekage-sama's raid on the Land of Fire secured us substantial development funds, our relationship with the daimyo began shifting toward autonomy. The others quickly understood. Even Rasa hadn't considered this angle. Ebizo continued. "It seems the daimyo has noticed. That's likely why he sent this probe. Still, proposing an alliance is strange. While it's a sound strategy, daimyo don't typically intervene so directly in shinobi conflicts." Rasa nodded. "That's precisely why I've returned." Drawing their attention, he continued. "I have a bad feeling. Kumogakure and Iwagakure may be planning something against us. Though their goal is unclear, we must prepare." The 4 Sunagakure leaders exchanged solemn glances before nodding in agreement. Rasa then turned to the girl beside him. "Allow me to introduce Tajitsuhime-sama, a trusted envoy of the White Snake Sage from Ryuchi Cave." The name sent a visible shock through the group. They knew of Ryuchi Cave, Rasa had previously explained the existence of the three great sage regions, but none expected he'd already made contact. As if answering their unspoken question, Rasa revealed her purpose. She's here to help you master Senjutsu chakra. Under their stunned gazes, Taijutsuheim offered a gentle smile. Rasa, while ignoring the different looks of others, elaborated. As a millennia-old sacred land, Ryuchi Cave possesses a refined system for Senjutsu training. Taijutsuheim-sama, as the White Snake Sage's confidant, can also sense natural energy. That's why I've invited her here. Once you harness Senjutsu, your strength will grow exponentially. Even if Konoha, Iwagakure, and Kumogakure unite against us, we'll stand firm. This time, their shock stemmed not from Taijutsuheim's presence, but Rasa's implication, and it is that Sunagakure might soon face a three-way assault. Then we can't afford to waste time. What do we do next? Pakura demanded without hesitation. Rasa glanced at Taijutsuheim, who stepped forward. In Ryuchi Cave, we initiate trainees by injecting natural energy through fangs, allowing them to perceive its essence. Here, however, that method is impractical. Instead, we'll follow the path of the Sage of Six Paths, founder of Ninshu, by having Rasa-sama share his Senjutsu chakra with you all. Chapter 143, Earth and Lightning. Iwagakure, Land of Earth. The massive village, encircled by jagged rock mountains, bore witness to a shinobi with Iwagakure's forehead protector darting across the stone terrain. Soon, a towering, spear-like stone structure loomed ahead, its surface etched with a single colossal character, Earth. This was the seat of Iwagakure's power, the Otsutsuki building. After a curt announcement by the guards, the shinobi ascended to the top floor. Kneeling immediately upon entry, he raised a scroll with both hands. Otsutsuki-sama. A message from the daimyo, Sunagakure has agreed. Behind a heavy desk, Inoki, the third Otsutsuki, a diminutive yet fearsome figure, accepted the scroll from his son, Tsuchi, a stalwart jonin of unwavering loyalty. And I will use OG names as it is. A single glance at the contents drew a cold snort from Inoki. Tsuchi dismissed the messenger with a glance before addressing his father. Father, how does the plan proceed? As I foresaw. Yet Inoki's expression remained severe. His next words were ironclad. The next phase is yours, Tsuchi. No one else can be trusted with this. Tsuchi's usually stoic face tensed. Understood. But, Father, must we sacrifice our own shinobi? Inoki's gaze was unyielding. Without question. You know the Uzumaki survivor's value as well as I. Tsuchi's jaw tightened. He recognized the subtext, Inoki's long-simmering resentment toward Rashi, the rebellious Four-Tails Jinchuriki. Beyond that, investigate Sunagakure's green miracle. Confirm whether it ties to wood release. Spare no expense. Hi! With his father's resolve absolute, Tsuchi stifled further protest. And Kumogakure's position? Inoki smirked. They'll cooperate. For now, our goals align. Kumogakure, Land of Lightning. Within a cloud-piercing fortress, the third Raikage, loomed over a secret meeting, his expression thunderous. Only two others attended. His son, the future fourth Raikage, and his most trusted tactician, Darui. Passing Darui the newly arrived scroll, the third Raikage's voice was a low growl. Darui. You'll handle the Sunagakure operation. Darui, already steeled for the task, met his leader's eyes without hesitation. Understood, Raikage-sama. I'll see it done, even at the cost of my life. Good. The third Raikage's tone defied his reputation for brashness, sharp with calculation. I'll admit that Kazekage Brad has impressed me these past 6 months. But Sunagakure remains weak. Darui fell into deep thought. While he agreed with the Raikage's reasoning, recalling the Kazekage's unpredictable actions over the past 6 months filled him with unease. Yet as a subordinate, once his leader made a decision, he had no choice but to obey, especially at such a critical juncture. At that moment, the future Fourth Kazekage, AE, spoke up. "Old man, what about Konoha? If we let them recover, everything we've done so far will be for nothing." The Third Kazekage's expression turned stormy at his son's words. "So what if they recover? Do you have a better plan? That damn Minato Namikaze alone has stymied all our efforts." The future Fourth Kazekage gritted his teeth in frustration, his face twisting with anger. "Damn it! What kind of monsters has Konoha been breeding lately?" Over the past 6 months of war, as one half of the AB combo, he had repeatedly clashed with Minato, experiencing firsthand the man's absurd strength. Against that freakish space-time ninjutsu and his ability to cast techniques without hand seals, numbers meant nothing as even Jonin were instantly wiped out. This was why Konoha had managed to hold out against 2 major villages simultaneously. Simply put, unless they could defeat Minato, neither Kumogakure nor Iwagakure could truly crush Konoha. Suddenly, the future Fourth Kazekage had a thought. What about that Kazekage? Is he as troublesome as Minato? The question gave both the Kazekage and Darui pause. It was something they'd overlooked. After a moment, Darui answered carefully. "The Kazekage has rarely engaged in direct combat, so intel is scarce. From what we've gathered, he's renowned for his magnet release, along with the sand manipulation techniques pioneered by the second Kazekage through studying Shikaku." Magnet release and sand control? That doesn't sound too troublesome, the future Fourth Kazekage mused. Compared to Minato's hex space-time ninjutsu, magnet release seemed far more manageable. Plus, Kumogakure had its own magnet release users. But Darui shook his head in warning. It's not that simple. While the Kazekage rarely fights personally, the list of powerful shinobi who've suffered at his hands is concerning. Even Minato, the very man giving us so much trouble, has lost to him, as has Jiraiya of the Sannin. Konoha's elder Danzo had his Sharingan and would release cells stolen. And recently, he even defeated the legendary demon Morio of the Land of Demons. The future Fourth Kazekage's eyes widened. He made Minato back down? Indeed. Though the details are unclear, one thing is certain, and it is that, in their confrontation, Minato was the one who conceded first. Darui's expression darkened further. But that's not the most alarming part. What's truly dangerous is this Kazekage's strategic brilliance. Whether it's his lightning strike on the Land of Fire or Konoha's crushing defeat in the Land of Rivers, every move proves he's not to be underestimated. Underestimate him, and we'll end up like Konoha. He hoped to caution the Kazekage with these words. The Third Kazekage understood, but unlike Darui, he believed in overwhelming power above all else. Enough. Don't spook yourselves. Remember this, no scheme can withstand absolute strength. In a few years, once B and Yujito mature fully, even Minato won't be a threat. That's exactly why we can't let Sunagakure succeed in creating their own Jinchuriki. Darui, make your preparations. Seeing the Kazekage's resolve, Darui could only bow and take his leave. And so, 3 days later, Sunagakure suddenly buzzed with unprecedented activity. Chapter 144, Shinobi Sect Training. It had only been half a month since the last Desert Flower Festival. Due to the arrival of the priestess from the Land of Demons, Sunagakure had once again become lively. The villagers were delighted, seeing this as a sign of the village's growing prosperity. Coming from Kumogakure, the shinobi named Darui passed through the main gate and immediately saw the bustling, joyful crowd along Sunagakure's main street. Behind him, 5 other shinobi wearing Kumogakure headbands curiously observed the village. They were the delegation sent by Kumogakure to negotiate an alliance with Sunagakure. For all 6 of them, this was their first time in Sunagakure. Their eyes carried a mix of caution and curiosity as they carefully observed this mysterious village, wanting to commit every detail to memory. And yet, Sunagakure's first impression on them was unexpected. According to Kumogakure's intelligence, Sunagakure was supposed to be an extremely harsh environment, a village nestled in a valley, plagued by strong winds and sandstorms, with a dry climate and severe water shortages, devoid of life, like a barren wasteland. But what they saw now told a different story. Lush trees grew along the cliffs, patches of flowers and grass flourished between buildings, and the village seemed anything but desolate. Instead, it was full of life. Darui could even catch a faint scent of summer grass in the air. The faces of the villagers were filled with smiles, their eyes shining with hope for the future. This made Darui understand why Reikage-sama was paying such close attention to Tsunagekyu's sudden rise. With this thought, he turned to the Tsunagekyur shinobi leading the delegation and said, "Baki-san, Tsunagekyur seems quite lively today." Since the Reikage had sent a trusted aide, Tsunagekyur naturally couldn't be disrespectful either. As the head of the ANBU, Baki had personally taken charge of welcoming the guests from Kumogakure and Iwagakure. Hearing Darui's comment, Baki replied without turning his head, "It'll be even livelier tomorrow. The priestess from the land of demons is coming to visit our Kazekage-sama." The land of demons? I've heard that your Kazekage-sama helped eliminate the legendary demon, Morio. I wonder if that's true. Baki had no interest in answering. He knew full well that Darui was only feigning ignorance. Given Kumogakure's intelligence capabilities, there was no way they didn't know what had happened in the land of demons. So, he simply said, "That doesn't seem to have anything to do with the purpose of your visit." Darui chuckled. "Indeed, it doesn't. However, we've long admired the priestess from the land of demons. I wonder if we might have the opportunity to meet her tomorrow?" Baki, of course, would not agree. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. The priestess is here specifically to visit Kazekage-sama. There are no other arrangements." "What a pity." Darui sighed, appearing genuinely disappointed. Then, as if shifting topics, he asked, "Well then, would it be possible for us to participate in tomorrow's festivities? We'd love to join in on the excitement." The group stopped in their tracks as Baki turned to scrutinize the 6 shinobi before him. Darui remained unfazed and smiled. "What's the matter? Is there a problem? Or is Tsunagekyur planning to confine us to our rooms during negotiations, forbidding us from going outside? That doesn't seem like proper hospitality." Baki narrowed his gaze and coldly replied, "There is no problem. However, after the festival, I expect to see all of you in your rooms. Otherwise, we will arrest you on charges of espionage." "Espionage? Hey! You Tsunagekyur shinobi are going too far. What do you take us Kumogakure shinobi for?" A Kumogakure jonin with a large afro immediately shouted in protest. Baki's expression remained unchanged. "Until we are allies, you are enemies." Baki's blunt words stunned the Kumogakure shinobi, and their anger flared further. Fortunately, Darui raised a hand to calm his agitated comrades. "Understood. By the way, has Iwagakure's delegation arrived yet?" "They arrived even earlier than you. Last night." Darui didn't ask where they were staying. Instead, he simply nodded. "Then, when will we be able to meet Kazekage-sama?" "The day after tomorrow. For the next 2 days, Kazekage-sama will first be meeting with the priestess." "I see. Dragon Oasis." In the lush green forest, atop a ground covered in thick grass, Rasa, Chio, Ebizo, Bunpuku, Pakura, Michikawa, Hana, and Onoka sat in a circle with their eyes closed, slowly refining their chakra. To an ordinary observer, their bodies might have seemed unchanged, but Tajitsuhime, floating nearby and watching everything, had a look of surprise in her eyes. She could clearly perceive that the pure, life-filled green Senjutsu chakra within Rasa's body acted as a conduit, forming invisible threads that connected everyone's chakra. Through this connection, Rasa's Senjutsu chakra was transmitted into the others' bodies. The result was that a faint trace of green Senjutsu energy was now mixed into the pale blue chakra they were refining. This was the very method Tajitsuhime had described, the same method once used by the sage of the 6 paths, who distributed chakra to others so that they, too, could wield its power. The sage had called it Ninshu, the shinobi sect. It was one of the most ancient forms of training. Even Tajitsuhime herself had gained awareness of Senjutsu energy through this method, receiving the White Snake Sage's blessing. For days earlier, Rasa had summoned her and expressed his desire to meet the White Snake Sage, hoping to find a way to help Tsunagekyu's shinobi quickly master Senjutsu. With the White Snake Sage's approval, Tajutsuheim had provided the method of Ninshu as an offering. In doing so, she had also secured a justified reason to stay. Her ability to sense Senjutsu energy was even greater than Hana's, and her experience in Ryochike's Senjutsu training made her invaluable in helping Rasa's group detect potential issues during their practice. For example, at this moment, while the other 7 showed no problems in their training, Bunpuku, the Jinchuriki, suddenly appeared to be in pain. Dark purple chakra began to swirl around him, resisting the flow of Senjutsu energy. Seeing this, Tajutsuheim's ribbons fluttered through the air, severing the chakra links between them. The 8 others slowly opened their eyes. Since this wasn't the first time, no one reacted with surprise. Bunpuku, however, pressed his hands together in apology. "My apologies, Kazekage-sama. Shikaku still despises this power." Although Bunpuku was a kind-hearted Jinchuriki in every way, he was no Naruto. Shikaku's centuries of anger toward humans for capturing and exploiting him made true reconciliation impossible. And with Bunpuku's nature, unless absolutely necessary, he wouldn't forcefully extract Shikaku's chakra. "I see. Then there's nothing we can do about it." Rasa sighed and nodded. Then he turned to Tajutsuheim and asked, "So, did any of us make mistakes in our training?" Chapter 145, Progress in Training. Although Rasa is currently the most powerful in controlling Senjutsu energy, his understanding of it and the methods of training are still far inferior to Tajutsuheim, who has lived for hundreds of years, let alone the White Snake Sage. Upon hearing Rasa's question, Tajutsuheim floated forward gracefully. After politely nodding to everyone, she spoke. "There are no major issues. You all truly deserve to be called elites among human shinobi, not to mention that there are also 2 Uzumaki orphans among you. In just 3 days, everyone except Lady Pakura and Mr. Bunpuku has already gained the ability to sense Senjutsu energy." The youngest, Hana, looked excited, while Chiyo, Ebizo, Michikawa, and Anoka remained calm. As for Bunpuku, who had not succeeded, his expression remained composed. Only Pakura's face darkened as she clenched her teeth and tightly balled her fists. However, sensing Senjutsu energy is only the first step in training. The real challenge begins now, absorbing and controlling it. The Senjutsu energy currently within you is all shared by Rasa, but from now on, you must attempt to absorb the natural energy around you on your own. Furthermore, in order to utilize Senjutsu energy and techniques, you must learn to control it. Take the natural energy of Ryochike as an example. Only when the ratio of natural energy, physical energy, and spiritual energy within the body reaches a perfect balance of 1 to 1 to 1 can one use our Ryochike's Senjutsu. Tajutsuheim paused, letting others digest all the information before continuing. Fortunately, based on my observations, the Senjutsu energy here is different from that of Ryochike. The absorption process does not seem to pose any risks, which is a good thing. However, you should still be careful, and if anything feels wrong, stop immediately. Everyone nodded, expressing their gratitude for Tajutsuheim's guidance over the past few days. After returning the gesture, she continued. "Then, Rasa-sama, I'll take my leave for now. If you need me, just summon me with the summoning jutsu." Although she wanted to stay, Ryochike was her true home. She had already been away for 3 days and needed to return to report everything to the White Snake Sage. "All right, thank you. Please extend my gratitude to the White Snake Sage as well." Humu. With that, Tajutsuheim instantly disappeared into the forest. Rasa then turned to the group. "These past 3 days of training have been effective. Since you can all sense Senjutsu energy now, my role is no longer necessary. Dragon Oasis has the highest concentration of Senjutsu energy, so continue practicing your absorption here. However, I recommend that you train separately while keeping an eye on each other. That way, if anything goes wrong, you'll be able to step in immediately." Everyone nodded in agreement, and Chiyo spoke up. "In that case, I'll take Hana and Anoka. You two men can form a team on your own. There were no objections, but Ebizo asked. And what about matters in the village? No need to worry. Right now, nothing is more important than mastering Senjutsu energy. However, Pakura, Michikawa, and Anoka, you still need to attend tomorrow's banquet. I'll have Baki notify you. Understood. Michikawa and Anoka nodded, but Pakura suddenly clenched her teeth and said, No. I don't want to waste time on something so meaningless. I want to stay here and continue training. The atmosphere immediately became awkward. Everyone could feel Pakura's frustration. Of the 7 people present, aside from Bunpuku, who was an exception due to the tailed beast, even a child like Hana had already sensed Senjutsu energy, yet she still couldn't. For someone as proud as Pakura, this was unbearable. Rasa sighed helplessly. We'll talk about you later. With that, he turned to Hana, who had been eager to speak but hesitated when Pakura interrupted. He smiled gently and asked, What is it, Hana? Did you want to say something? Hana looked nervous but still held onto Anoka's hand and said, Rasa-sama, tomorrow, I'd like to walk around the village with Anoka-ne. I don't mean to go out and play, I just want to help Ne-san get familiar with the village. I see. Well, if it's just for fun, you can go anytime. Rasa gave Hana a pat on the head to reassure her before continuing. But for now, you should stay here. The village is too dangerous for you right now. Dangerous? Hearing this, everyone was stunned. So, Rasa didn't waste anything before explaining. That's right. Don't forget, years ago, Kimobikure used an event like this as an opportunity to kidnap Konoha's Ninetales Jinchuriki. Realization dawned on them, and Anoka furrowed her brows. Rasa-sama, are you saying that this time, Kimobikure and Iwabikure are actually after Hana? Michikawa and Ebizo added. If that's the case, then from their perspective, Rasa-sama, you brought Hana here to become a Jinchuriki. Their words made Hana tremble. Rasa nodded. Exactly. That's why it's best for Hana to stay with you. As long as you're with her, she'll be absolutely safe. Besides, her sensory abilities will also help protect this place. Understood. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Hana no longer insisted on going to the village. All right, continue your training. With that, Rasa turned his gaze to Pakura, who had remained silent all this time. Pakura, come with me. In the lush forest, under the cool shade of the trees, Rasa brought Pakura to a secluded spot. He already knew why she had failed to sense Senjutsu energy. It wasn't a matter of talent since Rasa had observed her closely for the past 3 days and could clearly sense the changes in Senjutsu energy around her. The reason was simple, her emotions were too unstable. According to Tajutsuheim, all 3 great summoning realms required one crucial element for sensing natural energy, stillness. Only by calming one's mind could one perceive the flow of natural energy, and the same applied to Senjutsu energy. Pakura wasn't incapable of being still, but she was too competitive. Not only was she not the first, she wasn't even the second to sense Senjutsu energy. When even 2 children had surpassed her, her mentality wavered. Still, Rasa didn't comment on it. He simply said, From now on, I'll be training you personally. Pakura's expression immediately turned defiant, and she opened her mouth to argue. But before she could speak, Rasa added, This is my first time taking on a student, I don't want my first disciple to be an idiot. Pakura's expression grew complicated. In the end, the defiance in her eyes faded, and she scoffed with rosy cheeks. And me? Disciple? And I am not an idiot. Seeing this, Rasa felt relieved. Good. Then let's begin. Chapter 146, Cloud, Rock Operation. Sunagakure, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The entire village of Sunagakure was still immersed in sleep. In a certain room inside a building, the people from Iwabikure had already gathered. Leading them was the son of the Third Kazekage, Tsuchi. His expression was serious, and the room was eerily quiet, with the 5 ninjas below daring not to say a word. Time passed, and when the first golden rays of the morning light shone on everyone's faces, Tsuchi slowly lifted his head from his silence and spoke to the ninjas below. We've gathered information on the time of Sunagakure's celebration. The priestess of the land of demons will arrive at 10 o'clock. After that, there will be a 3-hour celebration. This 3-hour window is our best opportunity. During this time, I want you to do everything you can to gather as much intelligence on Sunagakure as possible while it's chaotic. Any questions? The 5 ninjas simultaneously lowered their heads in agreement. No problem, Tsuchi-sama. Alright, the focus of these 3 hours will be gathering information. After that, from 8 to 10 in the evening, during the banquet, is when we'll truly act. During that time. At this point, Tsuchi looked at a ninja with a small braid on his head. Magama, your task will be crucial. During this period, I need you to do everything you can to draw the attention of the people of Sunagakure. Any method will do. Upon hearing Tsuchi's words, the ninja named Magama immediately became excited. Don't worry, Tsuchi-sama, I've been itching to cause trouble for these Sunagakure ninjas. Alright. Since that's the case, everyone prepare yourselves, it's time to begin our operation. Meanwhile, in another building. In a room where the ninjas of Kumogakure were staying, the same orders were given by the Raikage to a ninja named Sammy. Sammy, your task is simple, just delay the time for our upcoming operation. The ninja named Sammy was also very excited. He was an absolute martial artist and naturally opposed the idea of an alliance. The chance to create chaos in Sunagakure was something he was more than happy with. Moreover, with the crucial moment of the alliance between the 3 countries and the arrival of the priestess from the land of demons, even if he caused a scene, Sunagakure wouldn't be able to do anything about it. This made him even more thrilled. However, what he didn't notice was that after the Raikage gave this order, there was a hint of regret in his eyes. Time slowly passed, and it was now 10 o'clock. Boom! With the thunderous sound of fireworks, the azure sky of Sunagakure was immediately filled with a variety of colors. Countless ribbons fell from the sky, followed by the lively cheers and the bustling sound of footsteps. On the main street of Sunagakure, everything had been freshly prepared, just like the last celebration. Banners were hung along the streets, and flowers were placed everywhere. The villagers of Sunagakure had come to the streets on their own, eagerly looking towards the village's entrance. The village's ninjas acted as guards, trying their best to maintain order. Sunagakure, on the rooftop of the Kazekage building. The 3 high-ranking officials of Sunagakure, Rasa, Pakura, and Michikawa, appeared here in formal attire. Rasa wore the standard Kazekage cloak, Pakura donned a tight black skirt, and Michikawa was dressed in a long robe. Originally, they only needed to attend the banquet in the evening, but after a day of private lessons and successfully sensing Senjutsu energy, Pakura was in a good mood. To give Rasa, the Kazekage, some respect, she decided to attend the welcome celebration. And since Pakura was attending, Michikawa, Rasa's trusted right hand, naturally wouldn't miss it either. At this moment, as the sound of various instruments played, all 3 of them could see a long, extravagant procession approaching the entrance of Sunagakure from the direction of the village's main street. At the same time, Saramu appeared beside Rasa and spoke. Kazekage-sama, the priestess of the land of demons has arrived in Sunagakure. Thanks, Saramu. From here on, follow your plan. Rasa replied. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I'll go prepare now. As Saramu left, Michikawa watched her figure inside. Saramu-sama is doing better and better in the village. I have to say, Kazekage-sama's ability to recognize talent is truly remarkable. First Saramu-sama, then Hana and Anoka-sama. Upon hearing this, Rasa glanced back at Michikawa and responded. Saramu is doing well, but I heard there are some complaints in the village? Rasa's words caught Pakura and Michikawa's attention. Michikawa didn't hesitate and replied openly. Yes, everyone feels that Kazekage-sama trusts outsiders too much. The atmosphere turned awkward at these words, and Rasa calmly asked, "What do you think, Michikawa?" Michikawa answered decisively, "Saramu-sama is not an outsider. With the village's current pace of development, more and more people will join Sunagakure in the future. Saramu-sama is a living example, showing that Sunagakure does not reject outsiders." Rasa nodded in satisfaction. Michikawa was indeed excellent in political insight. If it weren't for Rasa's accumulated knowledge from his previous life and his understanding of the situation, he might not have been as good as Michikawa in this regard. Michikawa's words also caught Pakura's attention. Pakura then realized why Rasa trusted this queen from Roran so much. There was such thoughtful consideration behind it. She had initially thought it was only because Saramu was beautiful. After all, the queen from Roran was truly stunning, and even though she already had a daughter, she exuded a kind of captivating charm that even Pakura could feel. This had led to some gossip in the village. However, now that she thought about it, all the people Rasa had brought to the village so far seemed to be women, and each one was more beautiful than the last. With this thought in mind, Pakura suddenly spoke. "This priestess Moroku is very beautiful, isn't she?" Pakura's unexpected words left both Rasa and Michikawa stunned. Rasa thought for a moment and then replied, "Yes, she is a very beautiful young woman, somewhat similar to Saramu, but younger." Michikawa also added, "I've heard that the priestesses of the land of demons have always been extraordinary beauties." Seeing the two men agreeing, Pakura couldn't help but coldly snort, which confused the two men further. Michikawa, however, curiously asked, "Kazekage-sama, you are putting on such a grand reception for this priestess. There must be another reason, right?" Rasa didn't hide his intentions. "I received information from the Umbu in the land of demons. It seems that some of the officials there are planning to overthrow the priestess." Pakura and Michikawa were both shocked. "Why?" Pakura asked, puzzled. "It's simple. The priestess's position, comparable to that of a daimyo, was made possible because of the presence of the Moryo. But now that the Moryo have been eliminated, those men won't allow a girl to stand above them." Chapter 147, The Trio. Rasa's words immediately made Michikawa understand, and Pakura clenched her teeth and said angrily, "Truly disgusting people. So, you're planning to help this priestess now?" "Yes," Rasa replied calmly. "The priestess and her predecessors helped me eliminate the Moryo, so I've agreed to help them in return, taking care of the priestess and the land of demons. Of course, their requests are one thing, but I'm also considering Sunagakure. While the land of demons is smaller than the land of wind, its land area and wealth are quite decent compared to other small nations. If we can form an alliance, it would provide us with more options." This made both Pakura and Michikawa nod, especially after the recent interference from the daimyo in the matters between Sunagakure, Iwagakure, and Kumogakure. "So, how do you plan to help this priestess?" Michikawa asked. "I have two ideas," Rasa replied. "First, like the relationship between the land of water and the land of waves, we can provide mercenary protection to the land of demons. Second, we can help the land of demons establish a ninja village." Pakura and Michikawa were both slightly surprised. The first option wasn't unexpected, it was a common method used by many smaller countries in the ninja world. But the second one? Well, helping out to develop a secondary military village might not be a good option. Michikawa pondered for a moment before opening his mouth. That might be a violation of the rules. The daimyo and other countries wouldn't agree to it. Pakura, however, shrugged dismissively. "Sunagakure doesn't need anyone else to tell us how to handle our affairs." Rasa directly voiced his thoughts. "If it were in the past, it would be difficult, but I have a feeling this might be an opportunity." An opportunity? Michikawa and Pakura were puzzled by this. Just as they were about to ask more, Baki appeared with a body flicker technique and knelt before Rasa. "Kazekage-sama," as expected, Both the ninjas from Kumogakure and Iwagakure have tried to break free from the Umbu's surveillance during the chaos of the celebration. Is that so? Rasa responded, as long as they're not in any secretive areas, let them watch. If we don't throw out some bait, how can we catch the big fish? Understood, Baki replied before leaving. Amidst the crowd, the priestess's luxurious carriage slowly approached the Kazekage building. Rasa-sama. 7 days had passed since their last meeting, and the priestess, Moroku, wearing a luxurious purple ceremonial robe, called out without hesitation when she saw Rasa. Her behavior made the guards, Shinami and Jippo, cough lightly and give her a subtle glance. Moroku then regained her solemn, sacred demeanor as the priestess. Rasa, noticing that Moroku seemed much more cheerful and youthful than when they first met, smiled gently and nodded. Shinami and Jippo, seeing this, assisted Moroku as she gracefully dismounted the carriage. Moroku approached Rasa with a poised step, smiling brightly as she greeted him. It's good to see you again, Rasa-sama. Rasa responded with a smile as well. Yes, the priestess looks much better. Moroku smiled, her face glowing with a subtle warmth. I must thank Rasa-sama for helping us in the land of demons to eliminate Morio. Rasa nodded and then introduced Pakura and Michikawa to Moroku. Please go rest for a while. Afterward, I'll show the priestess around Sunagakure. Umu! Moroku nodded excitedly. Under Rasa's lead, the group ascended to the Kazekage Tower, which was considered the highest authority building in all of Sunagakure. Along the way, Moroku couldn't help but look around, her curiosity evident as she gazed left and right. If it had been anyone else, they would likely have been apprehended by the Umbu as spies. However, at this moment, everyone expressed great goodwill toward the priestess from the land of demons, even going so far as to open some of the secret rooms for her. Before long, they arrived at the most powerful center of Sunagakure, the Kazekage's office. Moroku looked around excitedly and asked, So, this is where Rasa-sama lives and works? After seating everyone, Rasa spoke slowly. Technically, this is just my workplace. Being Kazekage is merely a job for me. After the banquet tonight, I can take you to my home, where Karura has prepared to welcome you. You'll also get to meet Anoka. Moroku's eyes lit up as she replied. That's wonderful. Speaking of which, to become Rasa-sama's wife, Karura must be an exceptional woman. Of course, Rasa replied, smiling. Moroku smiled even more brightly but then looked a bit saddened. It's such a shame. I can only stay in Sunagakure for 2 days before I have to return. Seeing the priestess's downcast expression, her guard, Shinami, spoke gently. It can't be helped, Priestess-sama. The land of demons still needs you. Moroku seemed even more displeased, mumbling quietly. Whether I'm here or not, it's the same. Rasa understood her feelings but chose not to say much. Instead, he replied, Well then, why don't you rest for now? Once you're ready, I'll show you around Sunagakure. Moroku shook her head, her face beaming with happiness. No need. I'm not tired at all. I want to learn more about Rasa-sama's village right now. Seeing this, Rasa exchanged a glance with Shinami, who seemed helpless, and then nodded. All right, then. I'll have everything prepared, and we'll head out. Sunagakure, as a ninja village, is naturally different from ordinary towns in many respects. In fact, most of the time, the entire village is under strict surveillance. As the largest group in the village, the ninjas, their lives aren't as carefree as the average civilians. This means that the villagers of Sunagakure live under a certain level of suppressive regulations, similar to a military regime. Even though in the past 6 months, the village has rapidly developed, and many people have gained a lot of pocket money due to these restrictive rules, they still suppress their desires for leisure and live restrained lives. But today was different. The reason this day could be called a celebration was because the village had relaxed some of its rules for the villagers and ninjas, allowing everyone to enjoy themselves freely. Even the ninja school gave the children a day off. On the streets of Sunagakure, the children of Michikawa and Saramu, Kunmi and Sara, along with a regular girl named Kanna, took advantage of this opportunity to go out and have fun. Chapter 148, Sand vs. Cloud and Rock. There's so many people. On the bustling street, two girls, Sara and Kanna, were holding hands, their eyes sparkling as they watched the lively crowd, the busy shops, vendors, and street food. They walked here and there, clearly overwhelmed by all the sights. Behind them, Kunmi, who looked like an adult, was closely following the two girls. Though Kunmi looked serious, his relaxed posture suggested that he was quite happy inside. At that moment, the smell of grilled meat caught Sara's attention before she excitedly ran through the crowded streets toward it. It was an outdoor barbecue stall. The owner, with a cheerful smile, was turning the skewers, the sizzling meat glistening with oil. A small table nearby was filled with people, eating happily, their faces greasy from the food. Seeing Sara approach, the plump owner warmly asked, "Would you like to try some?" Curious, Sara pointed at the sizzling meat and asked, "Uncle, what is this?" "This is Sunagakure's specialty, roasted camel. Would you like to try it?" Camel meat? Can you eat that?" "Of course. It tastes great." At this point, the girl named Kanna, who had been quiet, asked curiously, "Sara, didn't Roran have roasted camel before?" Sara scratched her cheek, speaking, "I'm not sure, but I've never eaten it. My mother never let me have things like this." Kanna smiled and said, "I see. Well, you have to try it." "Uncle, can we have 3 servings?" "Sure. Just a moment." Soon, 3 portions of roasted camel meat were served. Sara hesitated at first, but after tasting it, she quickly started eating happily. Compared to Sara, the daughter of Saramu, and Kunmi, the son of Michikawa, Kanna, a commoner, was more sensitive to others' opinions. She noticed that Kunmi was eating slowly and, thinking it was because he didn't like the food, asked, "Is something wrong, Kunmi? Not liking it? If you're not used to it, you don't have to force yourself." Kunmi gave her a strange look but then quickly responded, "No, it tastes great. My father always taught me to chew slowly when eating, it's better for the stomach." Kanna was slightly surprised but then realized Kunmi's background and understood. Sara, who could relate, chimed in. "When I was in Roran, my mother's maids would always make me behave like a proper lady. They wouldn't even let me make noise while eating. It was no fun at all. It's much better to eat meat like this." Hearing this, Kanna couldn't help but think that perhaps being a commoner wasn't so bad after all. She didn't have to follow all the rules like Sara and Kunmi did. Just then, Kunmi suddenly asked, "So, do you have any plans for the evening?" "Why?" Sara and Kanna both looked at Kunmi curiously. Kunmi thought for a moment, and a hint of expectation appeared on his serious face as he said, "I'd like to invite you both to my house." Is that okay?" Kanna was a little excited. As an ordinary commoner, she had always been very curious about the life of the noble family in the village, especially the Sand clan. Meanwhile, Sara directly agreed. "That sounds great. Anyway, my mother won't be home for the next few nights, so I'll be bored." "Oh, we should bring a gift when we visit for the first time, right?" Right. Kanna also realized. Kunmi immediately waved his hand. No, you don't have to bring anything. Just your presence is enough." "This won't do. You can't visit a classmate's house for the first time without a gift," Kanna said stubbornly. Sara's eyes lit up. Having once been a princess, locked in the palace and unable to step outside, she was now incredibly curious about this vibrant life. She immediately made a decision. "I've decided. Kanna, today our mission is to pick out a gift for our visit to Kunmi's house. Let's go." "Yeah, let's go." Seeing Sara and Kanna so excited, Kunmi's serious little face broke into a smile before he followed closely behind them. As the 3 of them rejoined the crowd, not far from where they were, in a small alleyway, two ninjas wearing Kirigakure forehead protectors were lurking in the shadows, watching the direction the trio had gone. Is it them? That's right. The boy with black hair is the only son of Sunagakure's high-ranking member, Michikawa. The red-haired girl is the daughter of the former queen of Rorin and now Saramu's only daughter. If we want to gather information on Sunagakure quickly, targeting these two kids is the best approach. Got it. Leave it to me. With that, the two ninjas disappeared into the wall, vanishing from sight. On the other side of Sunagakure, in a room at a certain inn. In the dark room, Tsuchi, the leader of the Iwabikure ninjas, had secretly arrived. Sitting across from him was a man with a nose reddened from alcohol, his whole body reeking of liquor. Compared to the impromptu move made by Kirigakure, Iwabikure had clearly been preparing for this moment for some time. Since the Kazekage incident, they had already sent spies into Sunagakure to investigate the orphan of the Uzumaki clan. Did you investigate what Otsutsuki-sama wanted you to? The Uzumaki clan's orphan? The other responded. The man didn't disappoint Tsuchi. I found her. The girl's name is Hana, and she's now a disciple of Sunagakure's elder, Chiyo, living with her. Chiyo, huh? She's quite a troublesome old woman. Is there a way to get to the girl? Tsuchi asked. Sorry, it was possible before, but recently, this girl suddenly disappeared. Disappeared? What do you mean? Just what it sounds like. It seems Sunagakure has realized your purpose and hidden the girl away. Can you find where she's hiding? The man looked at Tsuchi for a moment before Tsuchi took out a small bag from his pocket and tossed it in front of the man. The man opened it, and after examining its contents, his face showed satisfaction. Sorry, I couldn't find her, but I have another piece of special information. What information? You must have heard about the green miracle that appeared in Sunagakure, right? Huh? What does that have to do with the girl's hiding place? Heh, it's quite simple. I found something. The man said as he pointed in a direction. In that direction, around Sunagakure, there's a strange oasis where there was once only desert. Perhaps all the secrets you're looking for lie there. But I can't guarantee anything since I don't have the courage to go near it. Tsuchi's pupils contracted, and he nodded as he stood up. I understand. Thank you for your hard work. Here's your reward in gold. After saying that, Tsuchi's figure gradually faded, disappearing into the floor. What Tsuchi didn't notice was that the man, instead of acknowledging the gold on the table, smiled eerily, his pale skin taking on an unsettling quality. As the two of them left, white spores clung to the soles of their feet. Chapter 149, The Banquet. The night was bright under the moonlight. Due to the festival, Sunagakure had not imposed a curfew, and the village remained illuminated. Not far from the Kazekage building, a traditional Japanese-style palace was even livelier. This was one of Sunagakure's rare all-wooden structures, a place reserved for hosting guests. The grand hall was now filled with dining tables, exquisite dishes, and fine wine. Several of Sunagakure's high-ranking officials, along with the officials from the land of demons who had accompanied Moroku, had gathered here to enjoy the village's unique delicacies. At the highest point of the hall, atop a 2-meter-high platform, sat Rasa and Moroku. Additionally, Michikawa and Pakura were present, while the land of demons was represented by a minister named Mizuwa and Moroku's bodyguard, Jippo. Without unnecessary formalities, the banquet began. Despite having spent the entire afternoon touring the village, Moroku was still full of energy and spoke excitedly. Rasa-sama, Sunagakure is completely different from what I imagined. Oh? How so? Moroku thought for a moment before replying with a tone of wonder. Everyone says Sunagakure's environment is extremely harsh, but after this afternoon, I realize that's not entirely true. There are many places brimming with life and beauty. Even the seemingly barren areas have a unique desert charm. And most importantly, everyone I saw was smiling. It shows they have hope for the future. Though her words were somewhat naive, they resonated warmly with the people of Sunagakure. Sitting nearby, Michikawa chimed in supportively. That's all thanks to the Kazekage-sama leading the village to victory against Konoha multiple times, securing us the stability and funds needed for development. Moroku nodded earnestly. Umichim. Rasa-sama is the strongest shinobi I've ever met. He even defeated Morio. At that moment, the middle-aged man named Mizuwa raised his cup, his face filled with gratitude. For the land of demons, the Kazekage-sama is our savior. For generations, our country has sacrificed countless lives, including one priestess after another, just to seal the demon Morio. But now, it's finally over. I propose a toast to the Kazekage-sama. From his words, Mizuwa seemed like an honorable and fair man. Unfortunately, according to intelligence from the Covert Operations Unit, this man was far from simple. Sure enough, after downing his drink in one gulp, Mizuwa spoke again, his tone dripping with sincerity. Kazekage-sama, I'd like to take this opportunity to make a rather bold request. Oh? What request? Mizuwa's words immediately drew everyone's attention. Some of the Land of Demons officials below seemed to have anticipated this, setting down their chopsticks and looking up with expectation. Meanwhile, Moroku's smile vanished the moment Mizuwa stepped forward. Under the crowd's watchful eyes, Mizuwa stood up as if he were the true host of the banquet and declared, I propose an alliance between the Land of Demons and Sunagakure, one that includes the leasing of Sunagakure to protect the Land of Demons. As soon as these words were spoken, the eyes of Sunagakure's higher-ups lit up. They all understood what this meant. After all, one of the major sources of income for Kirigakure in the Land of Water was leasing shinobi to protect the Land of the Sea. Now, all eyes turned expectantly toward the Kazekage. There seemed to be no reason to refuse. As for the priestess sitting at the head of the table, everyone subconsciously chose to ignore her. Just a little girl. That was the unspoken thought in everyone's mind. And that was precisely why Mizuwa dared to be so bold. In his view, as the ruler of Sunagakure, the Kazekage had no reason to reject such a proposal based on his investigation. Meanwhile, Moroku bit her lip and lowered her head, the atmosphere growing increasingly tense. This reaction alone revealed the truth. Despite being the former priestess of the Land of Demons, Moroku had never truly held real political power. The only reason the officials had acknowledged her status before was due to the threat of Morio. But now, with the demon gone, ambitions began to stir. Among the men present, aside from her bodyguard, not a single one was willing to bow to a naive little girl. Seeing this, Rasa slowly set down his wine cup, his expression calm and unhurried as he spoke. My victory over Morio was not achieved alone. During the battle, I witnessed the souls of past priestesses of the Land of Demons, and it was with their power that I succeeded. His words instantly seized everyone's attention. The Sunagakure shinobi remained composed, merely intrigued by the details of their leader's feat, but the officials from the Land of Demons reacted with shock. What? The souls of the past priestesses? Is this true? The priestesses still held immense reverence in the hearts of the Land of Demons people. The moment Rasa mentioned their lingering presence, those with ill intentions suddenly felt as if the priestesses' spirits were watching them. Even Mizuwa's expression stiffened. Moroku, however, lifted her head again. Of course it's true. As gratitude for their aid, I made a promise to protect the current priestess and the Land of Demons. Here, Rasa's gaze swept over Mizuwa and the other officials below. Therefore, even without Mizuwa-san's proposal, safeguarding the priestess and your nation remains one of Sunagakure's duties. The hall fell into heavy silence. The ministers exchanged uneasy glances before turning to Mizuwa, who merely bowed respectfully. I see. Then we are deeply grateful for the Kazekage-sama's generosity. Rasa found himself mildly impressed by the man's composure and replied smoothly. No need for thanks. It's only natural. With that, Mizuwa returned to his seat, and the banquet resumed. A soft, grateful voice whispered beside Rasa. Thank you, Rasa-sama. He turned to see Moroku's bright, relieved eyes and smiled gently. There's no need to thank me. This is my duty. Watching this exchange, Jippo, Moroku's bodyguard, sighed heavily in his heart. He understood the situation better than anyone. On one side were internal forces coveting the priestess's authority. On the other hand, external powers are eyeing the land of demons itself. Caught between them, the nation had no choice but to align with one. For a fleeting moment, a dark thought crossed his mind: if only Morio had never been destroyed. But the world had no room for what-ifs. And judging by the priestess's joyful smile, her choice was already clear. Just then, a Sunagakure ANBU operative appeared at Rasa's side, whispering urgently into his ear. Chapter 150, Jinjutsu. Under the cover of darkness, atop the rooftops of Sunagakure, the head of the ANBU, Baki, stood firm. Behind him were 5 masked ANBU operatives, their gazes fixed on 2 specific locations within the village, the designated lodgings for the guests from Kumogakure and Iwagakure. Tonight, while Sunagakure hosted the banquet for the Land of Demons envoys, disturbances had unsurprisingly erupted in these 2 areas. An ANBU operative kneeled before Baki, kneeling on one knee. Baki-sama, Sammy of Kumo has provoked a confrontation with our guards under the pretense of demanding alcohol. Another operative appeared immediately after, reporting. The same goes for IWA, their shinobi, Gainen, is causing a scene under the same excuse. Baki let out a cold scoff. Humph. They can't even be bothered to come up with a better excuse? What about the others? Our operatives stationed inside the buildings haven't detected any movement, but... The ANBU hesitated before continuing. We suspect those remaining in their rooms are merely clones. Baki's eyes narrowed in displeasure. Test that theory. Hi! The 2 operatives vanished in an instant. Meanwhile, Baki turned to the 5 ANBU behind him. Heighten the surveillance. Monitor every corner of the village. Due to the festival, there was no curfew in Sunagakure tonight. Sarah and Kanna happily carried their prepared gifts, heading to Kunmi's residence as invited guests. However, as they passed through the lively crowds and arrived at the street bordering the Sand Clan's compound, the sudden silence unnerved Sarah. Though the distant sounds of celebration still echoed in their ears, the street before them was eerily empty, only a massive wall separating it from the bustling world beyond. Kanna, having grown up in Sunagakure, noticed Sarah's unease and whispered an explanation. It's always like this here. Beyond that wall is the Sand Clan's estate. Ordinary villagers avoid this area, so it's usually quiet. Ah, I see. Sarah nodded in understanding. As a former princess, she was familiar with the solemn quiet near royal palaces. Unconcerned, the 2 cheerfully proceeded down the deserted street. Neither noticed the world behind them slowly fading away. From the shadows, a dark figure emerged, hands forming a seal. Illusion arts, false surroundings technique. Sarah and Kanna soon reached the end of the street, where an aged gate stood before them. Kunmi greeted them warmly at the entrance, inviting them inside. However, something felt off to Sarah. She couldn't pinpoint what, yet an inexplicable unease settled in her chest. Kunmi and Kanna exchanged puzzled glances. What's wrong? Sarah wanted to voice her doubts, but strangely, a persistent voice in her mind kept telling her not to overthink it and that she was just distracted. After a moment of hesitation, Sarah reluctantly nodded. It's nothing. And so, the conversation continued cheerfully. Yet the more they talked, the more uneasy Sarah felt. First, the world around her felt unnaturally silent, as if frozen in a painting. Only Kunmi's voice reached her ears, while Kanna's words sounded muffled, distant. Second, Kunmi was acting strangely. In her memories, he was a shy, quiet boy. But now, he wouldn't stop talking, and his questions were oddly fixated on her mother. Something was wrong. But that insistent voice in her head kept dismissing her suspicions. Then, she noticed that the gifts they had prepared for Kunmi were gone. Huh? Her confusion deepened. When she tried to recall what had happened to them, she realized she couldn't remember how they had even arrived here, or entered the house. It all felt like a dream. Wait, dream? The word triggered a memory from her Ninja Academy lessons. Her instructor had once said, "The sensation of being trapped in a jinjutsu is like being stuck in a dream." A jinjutsu. She had been caught in an illusion. But why? Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. The priority was breaking free. Though first-year students weren't taught ninjutsu or chakra control, Sarah, as the Shrine Maiden's daughter, had received early training from her mother. Clasping her hands together, she focused her chakra. Release! In an instant, Kunmi's house dissolved around her. Her vision cleared, and before she knew it, she was still standing in the deserted alley outside the Sand Clan's compound. Beside her, Kana stood frozen, eyes glazed over. Though bewildered, Sarah immediately placed a hand on Kana's shoulder. Release! Kana jolted back to awareness, blinking in confusion. Kana, we were caught in a jinjutsu. Sarah whispered urgently, scanning their surroundings. Wah! Before Kana could process the shock, a harsh, hurried voice cut through the silence. TCH. How did this brat break the jinjutsu? I don't know. Both girls whirled toward the sound. Two towering figures emerged from the shadows, their attire distinctly not Sunegakure's. Their forehead protectors gleamed in the dim light. Kana's face paled. Keikumonin? Damn it! The two shinobi's expressions darkened. As jonin, they couldn't fathom how a mere academy student had dispelled their illusion. But hesitation wasn't an option. They lunged. Sarah and Kana's bodies were locked in fear. This was it. They were about to be silenced. But then, a whip of black iron sand snapped around their waists, yanking them backward. A small figure blurred past them as a familiar voice shouted, "Go and get someone for help." That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 7. Peace.